The history of Iran is not just long, it is elemental. It begins not with borders or kings, but with fire and stone. In a land where civilization first took root, here, beneath the burning sun and rugged mountains, one of humanity's first great empires rose. It rose not to conquer, but to unite. The Persians called it the land of the noble, and the world would know it as Persia. From the wisdom of Zoroaster to the armies of Cyrus the Great, Iran stood as a beacon between East and West. From golden capitals carved into cliffs to the scrolls of poets and philosophers, absorbing, transforming, and enduring, was a land of empires that ruled with tolerance and of revolutions that reshaped belief itself. But history was never kind for long. Invaded by Greeks, Arabs, Mongols, and more, Iran would bend but never break. Time and again it re-emerged, changed, defiant, eternal. From the fall of dynasties to the rise of the Islamic Republic, from whispered verses in forbidden books to fiery protests in modern streets, Iran has always lived between glory and struggle. To outsiders, it is often misunderstood. A land cast in shadows, defined by geopolitics and myth, but its real story is far deeper. A civilization that has outlived its conquerors, that remembers what others have forgotten, and that still burns with the same ancient flame. To understand its triumphs and tragedies, its pride and its pain. To grasp how a nation so ancient still shapes the modern world, we have to start from the beginning. It is often said that the geographical setting of a people will primarily determine their fate. Sometimes the implication is as simple as whether people will end up as fishermen or hunters. At other times it's more dire, sealing the fate of a nation as either doomed or lucky. Iran has always found its place at the center of civilizations that sought to conquer it. Iran can be described as a semi-fertile land. The reason for this is rooted in its geographical setting. Major mountain ranges dominate Iran, the Zagros in the west and the Alborz in the north. These limit the amount of flat arable land for cultivation. A large portion of central and eastern Iran is also covered by deserts. The Dashti Kavir and Dashti Lut are extremely dry and mostly infertile. Most of Iran receives less than 250 millimeters of rainfall annually. This makes it arid or semi-arid at best. Only the Caspian coast and parts of the Zagros foothills receive enough rain. Enough rain to support regular farming without irrigation. However, areas such as the Khuzestan Plain, southwest of Iran, are very fertile. This is because it is fed by rivers like the Karun. It is also home to the ancient Elam and early Persian empires, but we'll get to that in a moment. The strategic location of Iran benefited the people in the beginning. Areas like Mesopotamia, now modern Iraq, to the west of Iran were very fertile due to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Anatolia, modern Turkey, stood northwest of Iran and is also generally fertile, contributing to regional prosperity. Central Asia, to the north and northeast, arid and mountainous parts, but also fertile river valleys like the Amu Darya. While geography played a role in Iranian history, culture was paramount, shaping its destiny. Iranian culture developed on the lands of Kustan, the Iranian Plateau, and Central Asia, long before kings or caliphates. One of civilization's oldest stories began with small clusters of people across the Iranian Plateau, framed by the Zagros Mountains and the Caspian Sea. This region offered varied and fertile geography, ideal for settlement. By 7000 BCE, Neolithic peoples cultivated barley, wheat, and lentils, marking early agricultural advancements. They also domesticated animals like goats and sheep, a crucial step in human development. Villages such as Gandera, Tepe Siak, and Chaga Bonet became permanent settlements, foundations of early communities. Much of their history remains shrouded in mystery, yet two things stood out: their architecture and art. Their huts were basic mud brick houses. They utilized simple stone tools for daily life. Their art, however, hinted at an advancement well beyond their time, showcasing creativity. They carved symbols and geometric designs onto pottery and walls, leaving a lasting artistic legacy. By the 4th millennium BCE, another civilization emerged, the Elamites, powerful and culturally rich. The Elamites were a powerful people, with a deeply valued sense of culture and identity. They often interacted with neighboring civilizations like Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon, fostering complex relationships. Despite these interactions, they maintained a distinct and unique culture. Sometimes the relationship was cordial, but most times it was strained, leading to conflicts. The Elamites often came into conflict with Mesopotamian rivals and rising Semitic empires like Akkad and Babylonia. The Elamite language remains one of the greatest enigmas of ancient linguistics, a puzzle for scholars. It's not linked to any of the more commonly known Indo-European or Semitic language families. The Elamites developed their version of cuneiform, linear Elamite, a unique writing system. This system predated Persian writing and is still only partially deciphered today, holding ancient secrets. Their capital, Susa, founded around 4200 BCE, became one of the most important cities in the ancient Near East. It wasn't just the heartbeat of Elam. It was a vital cultural bridge between Iran and Mesopotamia. Strategically located between the Zagros Mountains and the Tigris River, Susa controlled trade routes connecting highland and lowland cultures. Over time, it absorbed influences from Akkadian, Babylonian, and even Hittite traditions. But the Elamites never lost their unique identity. After the fall of the Middle Elamite period in the 12th century BCE, Susa endured. When the Persians built their empire centuries later, they made Susa a royal capital once again. They also considered their religion central to their existence. Their cities were full of temples and sacred precincts. They worshipped in Shushanak, whom they called the protector of Susa. Over time, the Elamites became worthy rivals of their Mesopotamian counterparts, like the Akkadian Empire, the Babylonians, and the Assyrians. In a dramatic reversal in 2004 BCE, Elamite forces marched into Mesopotamia and brought down the mighty Akkadian Empire. However, the Elamite Empire finally fell to Ashurbanipal in 639 BCE and was absorbed into the ever-expanding Assyrian domain. Elam never regained its independence again. Though they never regained independence, their legacy was never forgotten. They carved inscriptions and built monuments across Khuzestan and Fars. The ziggurat of Chaga Zanbil is a massive temple structure constructed by Elamite king Untashnapirisha around 1250 BCE. It was dedicated to Elamite gods, particularly in Shushinak. This structure still stands today. Centuries later, Darius the Great carved his famous trilingual inscription at Behistun around 521 BCE. It used Old Persian, Babylonian, and Elamite languages. Excavations at Persepolis, the Achaemenid Empire's ceremonial capital, uncovered thousands of Elamite tablets used by Persians for administration. Most are bureaucratic records of wages, food rations, and supply orders. But they reveal something astonishing. The Elamite language, written thousands of years earlier, was still used by Persian scribes well into the Achaemenid period. The Elamites may have lost their independence, but they never lost their relevance. The next civilization discovered on Iranian soil was the Jiroft, and their existence was as mysterious as their discovery. In January 2001, on the dusty hills of Kerman province near the ancient mound of Tepe Oya, locals made a stunning discovery. They'd stumbled upon an ancient tomb, one that held dozens of intricate artifacts, unlike anything seen before in the region. There were elaborately engraved figures of animals, mythological beings, and architectural motifs. Some were carved from chlorite, a gray-green stone that glimmers under light. Others fashioned from copper, bronze, terracotta, and dazzling lapis lazuli. Archaeologists found this mind-blowing. Before this, there was no history of the Guruft culture. It all seemed to emerge from nowhere. Its sophistication hinted at a complex history, rivaling Mesopotamia, Elam, and the Indus Valley. It raised questions about early life on Iranian land. Long before Cyrus the Great and the Persian Empire, Iran was home to rich, dynamic, and complex cultures. Elam, Giri, and countless others were the true pioneers of Iranian civilization. This was until a great migration arrived. Around 20,000 BCE, a seismic shift began on the Iranian plateau. Waves of nomadic Indo-European speakers, known as Aryans, came from Central Asia. They were not one unified tribe, but a constellation of migrating clans. They brought new languages, chariots, and oral traditions. These traditions would evolve into epic poetry and scripture. Some tribes, like the Tyrians, wandered east towards the edges of China. These Indo-Iranian tribes gradually settled across the plateau and into northern India. Some mingled with locals, others displaced them. They introduced early versions of what would become Old Persian, Avestan, and Sanskrit languages. By 1500 BCE, some reached North Mesopotamia, rising to power as the ruling class of the Mitanni kingdom. Other waves of Indo-Iranian tribes pushed south, crossing rugged mountains, rivers, and deserts. Eventually, this massive movement split into two great branches. One group swept through Afghanistan into the Indian subcontinent. They conquered Dravidian civilizations of the Indus Valley, settling there, and their traditions evolved into Vedic India. The other group turned west toward Iran. These tribes brought chariots and horses, powerful weapons for military dominance. They overran native populations of the Iranian plateau, absorbing, dominating, and reshaping the cultural landscape. However, it wasn't all victory. Sometimes some tribes found themselves under the rule of the Assyrians. The Assyrians raided their lands and kept their ambitions in check. Some others, especially in the south, were ruled by the Elamites until they eventually gained independence. Their religion, too, was deeply symbolic. They worshipped forces of nature and cosmic principles, such as the sky, thunder, fire, wind, water, and earth. Deities like Mitra guarded promises. Varuna, who may have evolved into Ahura Mazda in the Iranian tradition, upheld the moral order of the universe. The idea of a universal truth or law, known as Rita in Sanskrit and Asha in Avest, became the heart of both Vedic and Zoroastrian thought. The Aryans believed deeply in the power of sacrifice, not only as a gift to the gods, but also as a way of aligning the human world with the divine. At the center of many ceremonies was a mysterious drink known in India as soma and in Iran as ha. It was prepared by crushing a sacred plant, and it was said to be both intoxicating and divine. The original ingredients are thought to be unknown, but the plant ephedra has been generally accepted as one of the ingredients for the homa in Iran. The drink was thought to confer strength, vision, and connection to the spiritual realm. Its preparation was the sacred duty of the priestly class, the Brahmins in India and the Magi in Iran. These Magi would go on to play a crucial role in the formation of Zoroastrianism, preserving its rituals, texts, and sacred knowledge. They also considered family life to be sacred. The hearth in the home served as both a family bonding area and a spiritual center, where sacrifices were made and they connected to their faith. Through it all, the Indo-Iranians laid the foundations for two of the world's great civilizations, India and Iran. While each would evolve in its own direction, their shared linguistic, spiritual, and cultural heritage remained a powerful link stretching back thousands of years. Among the many Iranian tribes that settled the rugged plateau of ancient Iran, it was the Medes who first rose to power and carved out a kingdom. We know bits and pieces about them, mostly from Assyrian records, a few Babylonian inscriptions, and more colorfully from Greek historians like Herodotus. The Medes first appear in the historical record in 835 BCE in the inscriptions of Assyrian king Shalmaneser III, which described them as a loose confederation ruled by 27 independent princes. But by the 7th century BCE, things had changed. Deioces was a village judge who was known for giving wise and fair decisions. People from other villages sought his wisdom, and in return he demanded that he be given royal authority. According to Herodotus, Deioces unified the Median tribes and established a kingdom with its capital at Ecbatana. The Medes built a 7-walled palace complex in Ecbatana. The walls were concentric, with each wall placed higher than the one within it and painted in 7 different colors. The innermost wall enclosed the king's palace and treasury. Colors were said to be symbolic and possibly even prophetic. The story of Deioces and his palace was given by Herodotus, but has not been archaeologically confirmed. After Deioces, his son Phardus took over and expanded Median power. But ultimately it was Cyrus, son of Phardus, who took the bold step that would liberate them. In alliance with the Babylonians, he led them to break free from Assyrian domination. In 612 BCE, the Medes and Babylonians launched a joint assault on Nineveh, the heart of the Assyrian Empire. They succeeded, and the mighty Assyrians fell. The Medes now stood as the major ruling power, dominating from Mesopotamia to Bactria. But the story of ancient Iran is not only political, it's also spiritual. Somewhere between 1200 and 600 BCE, in the heart of the plateau, a new religious philosophy began to take shape. One that would influence Judaism, Islam, and beyond. Its founder was a prophet named Zarathustra, who preached a radical idea. The universe is a battleground between good and evil, light and darkness, and truth and lies. The supreme god Ahura Mazda represented order and wisdom. Opposing him was Angra Mainyu, the spirit of chaos and deceit. Every human had a role in this cosmic struggle. Fire became the symbol of divine truth. Temples were built not for sacrifice, but for communion with light. Zoroastrianism was a profound departure from polytheistic systems. It was deeply personal and would become the state religion of the later Achaemenid and Sassanian empires. Iran was spiritually awakened, and the Medes had taken over, but not for long. The Medes had enjoyed a reign of great leaders from Deezes, the first ruler, to Freyhorts and Cyaxares, set them free from the extremely tight-fisted Assyrian grip. However, the last Median king, Astyages, would also be remembered. But not for his conquest this time, but rather for his fall. He was overthrown by Cyrus of Anshan. Cyrus, a rising star and former vassal, led a revolt against him and would eventually go on to unite the Medes and Persians into a new empire called the Achaemenid Empire. The Median kingdom was brief but pivotal. It marked the first time the Aryans established true dynastic rule over the Iranian plateau, a turning point that would shake the politics and culture of Iran for centuries. The Medes had risen and set the stage. Zarathustra's vision had begun to ripple across the land. But in a quiet corner of the Persian highlands, a new leader was about to rise. His name was Cyrus, son of a Persian chieftain. In the mid-6th century BCE, the Iranian plateau was a tapestry of tribes and small kingdoms. Among them were the Persians, led by a visionary chieftain named Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great was born between 590 and 580 BCE. Some claim he was a son-in-law of Iaragas. But according to Herodotus, he was a grandson of Iaragas, the last king of the Median Empire. Iaragas gave his daughter Mandane in marriage to Cambyses I, his vassal in Persia. Cyrus was born from this union. However, Iaragas had a dream he would be overthrown by his grandson. To prevent this, he ordered Cyrus killed. Herodotus states, Cyrus was given to a shepherd to raise by Iaragas' chief advisor. At 10 he was rediscovered by his grandfather, due to his outstanding abilities and allowed to live. Fate prevailed. Cyrus led a revolt against his grandfather, eventually overthrowing him. Iaragas became known as the king overthrown by his grandson Cyrus the Great. The Median Empire was just the first. Next, Cyrus turned towards Lydia, ruled by King Croesus. In 546 BCE, Sardis, the Lydian capital, was captured. The Ionian Greek cities became subject to Cyrus. It is not clear how King Croesus died. Some say he was executed in battle, while others state he was either burnt to death or saved by Cyrus himself and taken care of. Now Cyrus's greatest triumph came in 539 BCE with the capture of Babylon. He entered the city peacefully, revered by its people as a liberator. He took advantage of the fact that the people were already dissatisfied with the ruler Nabonidus. He even claimed to be a worshipper of Marduk, the national deity of the Babylonians. The people loved what he represented: freedom. And so in 539 BC, Babylon fell to Cyrus. The capture of Babylon also delivered Syria and Palestine, which had been previously conquered by the Babylonians. Through ruin and conquests came the birth of something new and beautiful: the Achaemenid Empire. The Achaemenid Empire was the largest the world had ever seen at that point. It included Persia, Mesopotamia, Anatolia, the Levant, Egypt, and Central Asia. This included Bactria, Sogdiana, Arya, and Khwarezmia, parts of the Arabian Peninsula, Libya, and some parts of Europe. The Achaemenid Empire was established by Cyrus, and its reign expanded with each new conquest, some after he was gone. Cyrus was famous for many things, particularly his leadership. But he was most revered by Christians for proclaiming freedom. He proclaimed that the people could return to their homes and rebuild their temples. This included the Jews who had been exiled to Babylon more than a century earlier. Their return to Jerusalem and the rebuilding of the Second Temple marked a turning point in religious history. Cyrus believed that religion was not a tool of oppression, but a thread of unity. He believed in Ahura Mazda, the chief deity of ancient Iranian religion and later Zoroastrianism. He recognized the gods of all people and preserved their holy places. This policy of religious tolerance became a hallmark of Persian rule. The Achaemenid Empire was a multicultural center built on the principles of religious and freedom and effective administration. Cyrus laid the empire's foundations. But it was Darius I who ascended to the throne in 522 BCE. He truly built the machine of empire. Darius was the son of Hystaspes, a satrap of Parthia, under the Achaemenid Empire. Cyrus left behind two sons, Cambyses, who succeeded him, and Bardia. Legend has it that Bardia was put to death by Cambyses when he ascended the throne, and an impostor named Gormeta was put in his place. In the summer of 522 BC, after the death of Cambyses, and with the help of 6 Persian nobles, he killed Gormeta and took over the throne. His ascension to the throne was not without opposition. The regions of Babylonia and Susanna rebelled a couple of times. Darius recorded that in 19 battles, he defeated 9 of the rebel leaders. Darius became the 3rd ruler of the empire. He organized the vast Achaemenid realm into satrapies, provinces, each governed by a satrap or governor. This system allowed distant provinces to flourish under local customs, yet remain tied to a central authority. Darius also introduced standardized currency, including the gold daric and silver siglos, in a uniform system of weights and measures. He built the iconic Royal Road to connect the empire's vast provinces from Asia Minor to Central Asia. It spanned about 2,700 kilometers, a route connecting Susa to Sardis. While regular travelers would take about 90 days to complete the distance, the route allowed royal couriers to complete the journey in 7 to 9 days. He also included relay stations with fresh horses, lodging, and security checkpoints. The Royal Road supported the economic prosperity of the Persian Empire. The Royal Road allowed messages and goods to flow swiftly across Iran and beyond, thanks to legendary Persian couriers. To bind this empire linguistically, the Persians adopted Imperial Aramaic as the lingua franca. Administrative, diplomatic, and daily life communication was conducted in its clean, efficient script. Messengers, traders, and satraps all spoke Aramaic. This linguistic unity helped shape the empire's identity. Darius also founded the majestic city of Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire. Much of the monumental architecture was eventually completed by his successors, especially Xerxes and Artaxerxes. Persepolis was designed to showcase the wealth, power, and diversity of the empire. It blended styles from across the empire, including Mesopotamian, Elamite, Egyptian, and Greek styles. Earlier in his reign, Darius commissioned the famous trilingual Behistun inscription, written in 3 languages, Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian cuneiform. It describes the death of his predecessor, Cambyses II. Around 519 BC, Darius went after the Scythians east of the Caspian Sea, then pushed into the Indus Valley. In 513 BC, he led a bold campaign into Europe, crossing the Danube River to chase more Scythian tribes. But the Scythians cleverly kept retreating and destroying everything behind them. Darius's army ran out of supplies and had to give up. Still, his efforts weren't a total loss. His governors in Asia Minor brought Thrace fully under control. They got Macedonia to submit, and took over the islands of Lemnos and Imbros in the Aegean. That meant Persia now controlled key access routes to Greece and the Black Sea grain trade. Crucial for the Greek economy, Darius saw conquering Greece as the next logical step, especially to keep the Greeks in Asia Minor safe. Before launching any attacks, he had the Greek coastal areas scouted. But things escalated in 499 BC when Athens and Eretria backed a rebellion against Persian rule in Ionia. After crushing the revolt, Darius sent his son-in-law Mardonius to punish Athens and Eretria. But a terrible storm wrecked the fleet near Mount Athos in 492 BC. He tried again in 490 BC, this time under a general named Datis. Eretria was destroyed. But the Persians were famously defeated at the Battle of Marathon by the Athenians. Darius began planning yet another campaign, but a rebellion in Egypt slowed things down. He died in 486 BC before he could try again. Under Das's son, Xerxes I, Persia reached its largest territorial extent. When Xerxes became king in 486 BCE, he was already around 35 and had spent over a decade managing Babylonia under his father, Cyrus the Great. However, he didn't exactly ease into the job. He had to deal with serious unrest right away. First up was Egypt, where a rebel leader had taken control. Unlike Dura, Xerxes responded harshly, and in 484 BCE he launched a brutal campaign, crushing the rebellion and ravaging the Nile Delta. Next came Babylon, which rose with two different rebel leaders in quick succession. The second one, Shemosherba, was put down by Xerxes' son-in-law, but again the response was fierce. Babylon's walls were torn down, temples looted, and most significantly, the sacred statue of Marduk, Babylon's chief god, was destroyed. That act sent a clear message. Xerxes wasn't just rejecting Babylon's political autonomy, he was turning away from their religious traditions too. Unlike his father, who took on the traditional titles of King of Egypt and King of Babylonia, Xerxes dropped them entirely. From now on, he was just king of the Persians and the Medes. There's a famous inscription where Xerxes talks about destroying a place where devas, or evil spirits in the Zoroastrian religion, were once worshipped. He says that, with the help of Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of Zoroastrianism, he destroyed the Da sanctuary and made it clear they were no longer to be worshipped. Many historians think this might refer to Babylon, suggesting Xerxes saw Babylonian gods as devas and was trying to stamp out their influence. Today, there are still debates about his spiritual affiliations. In 480 BCE, motivated to avenge his father's defeat at Marathon and urged by his brother-in-law, Mardonius Xerxes, launched a massive invasion of Greece. It took 3 years, from 484 to 481 BCE, to put everything in place. Troops were conscripted from all corners of the Persian Empire, and a massive navy was assembled to support the land forces. According to historian Herodotus, no military operation had ever been this ambitious. Even the logistics were staggering. 2 pontoon bridges were constructed across the Hellespont to move troops from Asia into Europe. When a storm destroyed the bridges, Xerxes supposedly ordered the sea to be whipped just to show his fury. Once the bridges were rebuilt, Xerxes oversaw the crossing for 7 straight days. Herodotus famously claimed the Persian army numbered 5 million, though modern historians believe it was closer to 360,000, with 700 to 800 ships backing them up. To support this massive invasion, they even pulled off a huge engineering feat, digging a canal across the Isthmus of Actium. This was to avoid the dangerous waters around Mount Athos. Despite the impressive start, the campaign quickly ran into trouble. The huge army struggled because of poor knowledge of the Greek terrain and the unexpected unity and national spirit rising among the Greek city-states. After early victories like Thermopylae and Mid-August 480 BCE, Xerxes marched into Attica, burning Athens to the ground on September 21st. But then things unraveled. Just 8 days later at the Battle of Salamis, his navy suffered a crushing defeat. With no fleet to supply his troops, Xerxes had no choice but to retreat back to Asia, leaving Mardonius in charge of the forces in Thessaly. But the next year, in a drawn-out battle near Plataea, on August 27, 479 BCE, Mardonius was killed, forcing the rest of the Persian troops to withdraw. While the war technically dragged on for another 13 years, Xerxes himself played only a minor role after that. After the devastating loss in Greece, Xerxes returned home to Susa and Persepolis, his confidence shaken. Many historians view this moment as the start of the Achaemenid Empire's decline. Instead of rebuilding Persia's strength, Xerxes doubled down on heavy taxation and launched a massive building spree, draining the empire's resources further. At Persepolis, he picked up where his father Darius had left off. Xerxes added the enameled brick facade to the Apadana and completed Darius's palace. Then he built his own palace, modeled after his father's, and possibly a treasury now known as the harem by archaeologists. He also started work on the vast hall of 100 columns, meant to be a throne room, but only managed to finish its base before his death. The hall was later completed by his son, Artaxerxes I. As time went on, Xerxes became more withdrawn, involving himself less in empire affairs and more in harem politics. In one infamous episode, he ordered the execution of his brother's entire family, reportedly at the queen's urging, but the court drama eventually caught up with him. In 465 BCE, Xerxes was murdered along with his eldest son by members of his court, including his powerful minister Artabanus. His younger son Artaxerxes I managed to seize control and succeeded him on the throne. And then came Alexander the Great, born in 356 BCE in the Macedonian capital of Pella. He was the son of King Philip II and Olympus, a princess from Epirus. As a teenager, he was tutored by Aristotle, who sparked in him a love for philosophy, medicine, and science. Though Alexander would outgrow some of Aristotle's ideas, family tensions caused Alexander and his mother to flee after his father divorced Olympias. Alexander fled only to reconcile and return home. Even then, his position as heir seemed uncertain. That all changed in 336 BCE when Philip was assassinated. The army rallied around Alexander, and at just 20 years old, he seized the throne. From day one, he had his sights on Persia. He knew their wealth could pay for his powerful army and clear his debts. In 334 BCE, Alexander crossed into Asia with about 35,000 troops, leaving his trusted general Antipater in charge. His army was incredibly well balanced, featuring archers, javelin throwers, heavy cavalry, and the legendary phalanx formation. Engineers, scientists, historians, and surveyors traveled with him, a sign Alexander was planning more than a quick conquest. After a symbolic stop at Troy, inspired by Homer, he fought his first big battle at the Granicus River. The Persians tried to lure him into a trap mid-river, but Alexander won a decisive victory. Thousands of Greek mercenaries fighting for Persia were killed, and the survivors were chained and sent home as a warning. This win opened up Western Asia Minor in place of tyrants. Alexander set up democracies, showing off his pan-Hellenic ideals, met Persia at Gaugamela in 331 BCE, a battlefield clash that sealed Athens' fate centuries ago. Alexander captured Persepolis. He took more than the city and throne, claimed the symbol of Persian majesty. The city was burned, and the royal treasury was looted. And with the death of Darius III, Persia's story as an independent empire ended. From Cyrus's liberating vision to Darius's effective administration, with Xerxes' great ambition and Alexander's conquest, the Achaemenid Empire had seen its end. Yet, the story of Iran was just starting, and the next chapter would be the rise of the empires. In 330 BCE, Alexander the Great swept through Persia like a wildfire. Achaemenid Empire, centuries strong, crumbled before his armies. But Alexander's victory was short-lived. Just 7 years later, he was dead, a young king with no heir. After Alexander the Great died in 323 BCE, his vast empire was carved up by his top generals. One of them, Seleucus, became governor of Babylonia in 321 BCE, but another general, Antigonus, pushed Seleucus out. So Seleucus teamed up with Ptolemy of Egypt, defeating Antigonus's son, Demetrius, in battle. He managed to take back Babylonia in 312 BCE. That victory marked the birth of the Seleucid Empire. Seleucus didn't stop there. By 305 BCE, he expanded his territory east to the Indus River and west to Syria and Anatolia. That the Battle of Ipsus. Eventually, in 281 BCE, Seleucus was assassinated by Ptolemy Ceraunus, the bitter son of his old ally. His son Antiochus I took over, followed by a line of successors, including Antiochus II, Seleucus III, and Antiochus III, known as Antiochus the Great, under Antiochus III. The empire saw major administrative reforms inspired by Persian systems. streamlined to reduce power struggles between military and political elites. Governors called strategos ruled the provinces, handling both civil and military duties. Key cities like Sardis in the west and Seleucia on the Tigris in the east anchored this sprawling empire. The Seleucids were a powerhouse in the Middle East, controlling important trade routes through the Taurus Mountains, and the Hellespont, spreading Greek culture far and wide. Greek language, customs, and aristocracy dominated, especially in the cities. However, not everyone welcomed this cultural takeover. The Jews in particular resisted fiercely when Antiochus IV tried to impose Greek religious practices, including defiling the Jewish temple. This led to the famous Maccabean revolt in 165 BCE, which eventually freed Judea from Seleucid control. Achaemenid IV attempted to forcibly impose Hellenistic culture and religion on the Jewish people. He outlawed Jewish religious practices like circumcision, observance of the Sabbath, and following their dietary laws. To make matters worse, he erected an altar to Zeus right in the temple, and ordered pigs, considered unclean to the Jews, to be sacrificed there. For the Jewish community, this wasn't just political oppression. It was an allowed assault on their faith and identity. A Jewish priest named Mattathias in the village of Modin started the rebellion. He refused to carry out a pagan sacrifice demanded by the Seleucid authorities. Instead, he killed the official and sparked open resistance. After Mattathias died, his son, Judah Maccabee, also known as the Hammer, took over leadership. The Maccabees, as the rebels came to be known, used guerrilla warfare to defeat much larger Seleucid forces. In 164 BCE, they successfully recaptured Jerusalem and cleansed and rededicated the temple. This event is celebrated in the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. The Seleucid Empire's decline began around 200 BCE. They suffered their first major defeat against the rising Romans in 190 BCE. One by one, territories slipped away. Greek cities regained independence and new kingdoms like Pergamum and Cappadocia broke free. Eastern lands like Parthia and Bactria declared independence too. Even Antiochus III managed to briefly reclaim parts of Syria and Armenia. However, the empire's days were numbered. After Antiochus IV died in 164 BCE, things unraveled quickly. They lost Commagene, Judea, and eventually almost everything east of the Euphrates. By 64 BCE, when Rome finally took over, the once mighty Seleucid Empire had shrunk to just a sliver of territory. This sliver was barely hanging on. For over a century, the Seleucids had ruled vast territories from Syria to the Indus, bringing with them Hellenistic cities, Greek theaters, and the worship of Olympian gods. Now their time was over. There were new players on the field, and they were the Parthians. The Parthians were a nomadic Iranian people. Originally from Central Asia, they gradually moved into the region of Parthia and over time settled. Adopting the local language and customs, around 250 BCE, a leader of the Parni named Arsaces I seized the opportunity presented by Seleucid weakness. Arsaces revolted, established his own independent rule in Parthia, founding the Arsacid dynasty. This dynasty would go on to rule for nearly 5 centuries. His successors solidified control along the southern shores of the Caspian Sea. They gradually expanded their territory, challenging Seleucid dominance and asserting themselves as a new power in the Iranian plateau. The Parthian state transformed from its nomadic origins into a formidable empire, especially under Mithridates I. Mithridates I reigned from 171 to 138 BCE. He significantly expanded the empire's boundaries, conquering Media, Babylonia, and much of what had been Seleucid territory in Mesopotamia. The empire continued to grow under rulers like Artabanus II, who further extended Parthian influence. Over the Iranian plateau and the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, however, expansion was not without challenges. The Parthians faced persistent threats on their northeastern borders from nomadic tribes, including the Scythians, whose raids destabilized the frontier regions. These invasions tested the resilience of the Arusid dynasty. One of the most significant Parthian monarchs was Mithridates II the Great, who reigned from 123 to 88 BCE. Mithridates II restored Parthian power by decisively defeating the Scythians and securing the empire's eastern borders. By 92 BCE, Mithridates II was powerful enough to engage diplomatically with the Roman Republic. Concluding the first formal treaty, this marked the beginning of a long and tumultuous relationship between the two great powers of the ancient world. Despite occasional uprisings and border conflicts, Mithridates II maintained control over Iran and northern Mesopotamia until his death. The period following Mithridates II's reign was marked by political instability. Stability was briefly restored when Senatris, an elderly nobleman, was placed on the throne with the backing of Central Asian tribes. Real order returned under his son Phraates III, who ruled from 70 to 58 B.C., stabilizing the empire and asserting Parthian authority. The Parthian Empire at its height was a complex, multi-ethnic state, combining Persian imperial traditions with Hellenistic cultural elements. Arcasta rulers maintained the title King of Kings, allowing autonomy to powerful noble families and local governors. This decentralization of power would eventually be fatal for the Parthian Empire. The empire was renowned for its military prowess, especially cavalry and horse archers. Their famous tactics, such as the Parthian shot, proved devastating against enemies like the Romans. The Parthians clashed with Rome multiple times over control of Armenia, Syria, and Mesopotamia. One of their greatest military victories came at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BCE. Parthian cavalry annihilated a Roman army led by Cassus, one of the members of Rome's first triumvirate. He expected an easy victory. Instead, he walked into a desert trap at Kar, where the Parthians unleashed their cavalry. Kras was defeated, his son killed, and Rome humiliated. Despite this success, the Parthians were often on the defensive as the Romans consistently weakened their defenses. The political structure of the empire, with its reliance on noble families and semi-autonomous regions, made it difficult to mount sustained centralized resistance against external threats. Nonetheless, Parthia remained a key power for centuries, controlling vital trade routes, including the Silk Road, acting as a cultural and economic bridge between East and West. By the 3rd century CE, the Parthian state had started to visibly decline. The decline in Parthian power was fueled by ongoing civil wars and devastating smallpox outbreaks. Repeated Roman invasions even saw the sacking of the Parthian capital Ctesiphon. The last years of the Arsacids were dominated by a bitter power struggle between two brothers. Vologases VI ruled from Ctesiphon, while Artabanus IV controlled Media and Khuzestan. Roman interference worsened the situation, as Emperor Caracalla played one brother against the other, eventually launching attacks that left Armenian forts in ruin. Even though Artabanus briefly defeated the Romans, his authority was shaken, opening the door for new challenges to step forward. One of these challenges was Lord Sassan, a warrior priest guarding the sacred fire temple of Anahid at Istok. Through marriage into the local Bosringjed royal family of Fars, his son Papak began to rise in prominence, assisted by his sons Shapur and Ardashir. His family prided itself on its royal ancestry, dating back to the Achaemenid era. They even left images of themselves on the walls of Persepolis, signaling their ambition to revive the grandeur of ancient Persia. Ardashir, the most ambitious of the brothers, seized control of the fortress of Derabjurd. He soon launched an open rebellion around 212 CE, claiming he was destined to restore Persian greatness and unite the fractured land. His coins, bearing both his image and that of his father, symbolized his defiance and royal aspirations. After his brother Shapur's accidental death, Ardashir became the uncontested head of the family. Ardashir wasted no time asserting himself. Over the next 12 years, he conquered neighboring rulers across Fars and beyond, taking care to invest in modern armory, while his Parthian rivals clung to outdated military styles. In 224 CE, he met Artabanus IV in a final battle at Hormozdan and defeated him decisively, assuming the ancient Persian title King of Kings of Iran. To commemorate his victory, Ardashir ordered majestic rock reliefs carved near his capital, showing the supreme god Ormusd bestowing the symbol of kingship upon him. His conquest didn't stop there. He marched on Ctesiphon. Some subdued parts of Armenia and northwest Arabia, and even pressed eastward into Khuzan territory, establishing what became known as the Kushano-Sassanian kingdom. Ardashir later turned back westward, attacking Roman frontier towns and besieging the city of Hatra, which fell in 240 CE. Ardashir's military successes brought him face to face with the Romans. presented himself not just as a new ruler, but as the true heir of the ancient Achaemenids, reviving Persian claims over Eastern Roman lands. He introduced a new imperial coinage in silver and gold, reviving the use of gold coins, reminiscent of ancient Persian kings. His coins bore his portrait on the obverse, while the reverse displayed a sacred fire along with inscriptions. These coins were symbolic, broadcasting his religious and political message. Ardashir was not just any king. He was the chosen ruler of a land whose rulers descended from the gods. Sassanians claimed the old title of Iranshar, or Empire of the Iranians, reflecting Ardashir's ambition to unite all Iranian peoples under one throne. This term evoked ancient Persian unity and carried deep cultural and religious significance. His reign marked the start of the so-called Second Persian Empire, which for the next 4 centuries stood as a global power rivaling Rome and Byzantium. Ardashir's legacy extended beyond warfare and conquest. He was remembered as a model king, founder of cities, great administrator, and promoter of Zoroastrianism. He carefully replaced unreliable vassal kings with his own relatives and followed the Parthian precedent of balancing power by entrusting high offices to influential noble families. These aristocratic houses intermarried with the Sassanian royal family and continued to wield enormous influence in both military and civil affairs. Ardashir is also credited with initiating cultural reforms, including the development of the Sassanian calendar and, according to tradition, the invention of Bokaman. His political testament, known as the Aid, became a respected manual on kingship and statecraft, inspiring rulers even into the Islamic period. In the religious sphere, the Sassanian world was initially pluralistic, but this started to change with the rise of new religious movements, especially Manichaeism. Manichaeism was founded by Mani, a prophet from Babylon, who aimed to blend Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Christianity into a new universal faith. Mahony claimed his teachings were superior to previous religions and offered the only true path to salvation. He even used Zoroastrian terms to explain his faith, which angered Zoroastrian clergies. The powerful Zoroastrian high priest Qida played a key role in shaping the empire's religious policies. Initially serving under Ardashir and Shapur, Qida steadily gained influence, eventually becoming the head of the Zoroastrian church under kings like Hormizd and Bahram. He persuaded the monarchy to back Zoroastrianism as the empire's national religion due to the growing influence of Christianity from the Roman Empire. Mani's bold theological claims and his refusal to submit to royal authority made him a marked man. King Bahram I of the Sassanian Empire, under pressure from Qida and the Zoroastrian establishment, had Mani tried and executed in 274 CE. This event symbolized the growing fusion of religious orthodoxy and state power in the Sassanian world. Qida's inscriptions boast of smashing pagan idols, building fire temples, and converting non-Zoroastrians. He even claimed to have suppressed Jews, Buddhists, Brahmins, Christians, and Manichaeans across the empire. However, modern historians view Qida's statements as exaggerated. While these religious conflicts simmered, political instability was also brewing. After Bahram I, his successors faced both internal revolts and external threats. Bahram II, for instance, had to put down a rebellion led by his brother Hormos, while simultaneously facing the Roman Emperor Carus, who briefly marched on the Sassanian capital Ctesiphon. Carus's mysterious death spared the empire further devastation. Bahram II's reign, however, wasn't just marked by conflict. It also saw remarkable cultural achievements. Sassanian art reached new heights of realism and elegance as seen in rock carvings and coinage. The inclusion of Sheikh Perduktik, Queen of Queens, on coins suggested that women in the royal family held significant symbolic status. Following Bahram II's death was an internal succession crisis. Eventually, the majority invited Narseh, the great king of Armenia and a member of the royal family, to restore order. In his inscriptions at Paykali, which is in modern Iraq, Narseh portrayed his ascent as divinely guided and rooted in ancient royal traditions. To assert his legitimacy, he even carved his name over that of Bahram II in an earlier royal relief. After a period of turmoil, Narseh, the Sassanian king, sought to bring back the spirit of religious tolerance practiced by the empire's founders, Ardashir and Shapur. His reign, however, is most remembered for his disastrous war with Rome. Although he initially defeated the Roman general Galerius, Nari eventually suffered a crushing defeat. This forced Persia into an unfavorable peace treaty in 299 CE. The treaty ceded 5 provinces beyond the Tigris River to Rome. Recognizing the Tigris as the official boundary, also handed Armenia and Iberia over to Roman influence. Nari died not long after, leaving behind an empire that had lost both land and prestige. His successor, Hormozd II, faced significant internal opposition from the nobility. They murdered his heir, blinded one son, imprisoned another. Eventually, they installed Shapur II, an unborn child, as king. Shapur's early years were chaotic. In the south, Arab tribes raided Persian territory. They devastated cities and farmland in Far and Kuzan. In response, Shapur led brutal military campaigns to punish the Arabs. He also built a defensive barrier, Shapur's Ditch, to secure the frontier. The Arabs nicknamed him the Piercer of Shoulders because of his harsh tactics. To the northeast, nomadic Hunnic tribes, the Achaemenids, threatened Persia's borders. Shapur balanced fighting these eastern enemies with frequent wars against Rome, sometimes having to rush back and forth between the two fronts. Hostilities began when Constantine the Great, who had embraced Christianity, he offered refuge to a Persian prince and supported Christian communities inside Persia and Armenia. These tensions sparked nearly continuous warfare from 337 to 359 CE. Shapur's forces achieved repeated victories, capturing key Roman strongholds like Amida and Singara. The high point came in 363 when Emperor Julian, known for his military prowess, he launched a massive invasion of Persia. Though he reached Ctesiphon, Persia's capital, a fierce counterattack forced him to retreat. During this retreat, Julian was killed. His successor, Jovian, signed a humiliating peace treaty, returning Persian lands and ceding important Roman border towns. Shapur used this moment to annex Armenia and other border regions, restoring Persia's standing as the dominant power in the east. For nearly 3 decades, Shapur II fought the Romans without suffering a single defeat, earning respect even from his enemies. His empire stretched across 18 major provinces, covering territories from Mesopotamia and Iran to Central Asia and beyond. Internally, Shapur II was burdened with the rapid rate at which Christianity was spreading, especially in Armenia, where it had become the official religion. Many Christians in Persia sympathized with the Christian Roman emperors and were viewed as potential traitors. They were accused of mocking Zoroastrianism, refusing military service, and even collaborating with Roman spies. In response, Shapur cracked down, called together religious councils led by the Zoroastrian high priest Adabid, son of Maharbend. After theological debates, Zoroastrianism was declared the superior faith and a royal decree followed. No false religions would be tolerated. This marked the formal establishment of Zoroastrianism as the empire's state religion, complete with a powerful clerical hierarchy. This religious consolidation also led to the creation of the Avestan alphabet, designed to preserve the sacred Zoroastrian texts with precise phonetic accuracy. Shapur II's reign was not only about war and religion, it also left a rich cultural legacy. Its coinage is abundant and detailed, reflecting different phases of his long life. Persian art flourished, producing magnificent silver plates showing the king hunting boars and lions, classic symbols of royal authority. Stucco busts and grand rock reliefs, such as those at Byzantion, depict Shapur alongside his successors and gods like Mithra. One famous relief shows Shapur handing the royal diadem to his brother Ardashir II, while the defeated Roman Emperor Julian lies beneath their feet. A striking image of Persian triumph over Rome. Carvings on stone show the scene. Shapur on horseback, Valerian kneeling in submission. It was more than propaganda. It was a symbol. The East had risen again. The Sassanid period was a golden age of architecture, religion, and art. At Ctesiphon, the Tak Khosra, or Arch of Khosra, still stands as one of the largest single-span brick arches ever built. Fire temples blazed across the land, and stone carvings narrated tales of divine right, royal conquest, and heavenly order. Sassanid metalwork, textiles, and ceramics were prized across the known world. Court life was rich with music, poetry, and elaborate rituals. In the decades following the death of Shapur, the Sassanid Empire entered a prolonged era of political instability, social unrest, and religious tension. This would persist for nearly a century and a half. His successor Shapur III, who reigned from 383 to 388, was a just and compassionate monarch. He ended the persecution of Christians and negotiated a peace treaty with the Eastern Roman Empire that divided Armenia between the two powers, establishing Persian control over a larger portion of the region. Yet Shapur III, too, fell victim to the hostility of the elites and was assassinated. Bahram IV, who followed, was similarly committed to justice and achieved military victories against Hunnic invasions. But his attempts to discipline his commanders led to his murder in 399 CE. This persistent aristocratic opposition shaped the reign of Yazdegerd I, one of the most remarkable rulers of the Sassanian era. Intelligent, highly educated, and known for his nobility of character, Yazdegerd strove to curtail the power of the nobility and the clergy. He promoted religious tolerance, granting Christians and Jews freedom of worship, and allowed an autonomous Persian church. He earned admiration from Jewish communities who hailed him as a new Cyrus and maintained friendly relations with Rome. However, his progressive policies enraged the powerful classes who accused him of numerous offenses, branded him a sinner. Ultimately, he was assassinated in a remote area. Determined to prevent his family from reclaiming power, the nobles killed his son Shapur. They reluctantly accepted another son, Bahram V, who seized the throne with military backing from Arab allies. Bahram V, who ruled from 421 to 438 CE, renewed persecution of Christians, partly in response to Christian missionary activity. This sparked a brief war with Byzantium. The eventual peace agreement mandated mutual religious tolerance. It also established financial support from Byzantium for the defense of the Caucasian passes. Yazdegerd II, Bahram's son, encouraged intellectual inquiry and initially maintained friendly relations with Christian communities. However, when Christian unrest erupted in Armenia and elsewhere, Yazdegerd launched efforts to restore Zoroastrian dominance. He sent his vizier Mernasi to reconvert Armenia, an endeavor that failed. The death of Yazdegerd II ushered in yet another round of instability. His eldest son Hormos III was swiftly overthrown and killed. Bahram the Maharan installed the more acceptable Peroz on the throne. Peroz initially succeeded in suppressing revolts. He also defended Persia's northern borders, but his reign ended in catastrophe. He faced a new and formidable enemy, the Hephthalite Huns, who had seized large swaths of Central Asia. They posed an existential threat to the Sassanian realm. Despite early victories, Peroz suffered a crushing defeat in 484 CE. He lost his life and his army in a disastrous campaign against the Hephthalites. The invaders annexed vast territories in eastern Iran. They imposed a heavy annual tribute on the humiliated empire. This defeat, compounded by years of famine, left Persia shattered. The nobility placed his brother Balash on the throne. Balash was a gentle and peace-loving ruler. He granted Christians freedom of worship and permitted the flourishing of Nestorian Christianity within Persia's borders. Nestorianism, which emphasized the distinct human and divine natures of Christ, provided an alternative to the Roman Church. It was more acceptable within the Zoroastrian environment, fostering a unique religious landscape in Persia. However, despite his tolerance and mild rule, Balash was unable to restore Persia's fortunes. With the empire in financial ruin and Byzantium refusing to pay subsidies, the nobility lost patience. Balash was deposed and blinded, replaced by Qavid I, a son of the ill-fated Peroz. Qavid inherited an empire on the brink of collapse. Treasury was empty. Famine and war had devastated the land, and Persia was still obliged to pay tribute to the Hephthalites. The aristocracy had grown dangerously powerful, while the common people faced deepening poverty and despair. It was in this atmosphere of discontent that the revolutionary movement known as Mazdakism took root. Preaching radical social equality, the redistribution of wealth, and communal sharing of property, and even women, the Mazdakites offered a vision of justice and reform that resonated with the desperate masses. By the early 6th century, the Sassanian Empire found itself beset on all sides by foreign enemies, internal rebellions, religious divisions, and deepening social inequality. Yet, despite this turbulence, the empire survived, and would under Qavid's son, Khosrow, I embark on a path of recovery, reform, and renewed imperial strength. The tumultuous century from 379 to 531 CE therefore stands as one of the most critical and transformative chapters in the long history of Sassanian Iran. After witnessing the devastating effects of Mazdakism, Qavid I decisively shifted his policies toward the restoration of Zoroastrian orthodoxy and the consolidation of royal authority. The upheaval had already weakened the nobility, many of whom had been killed, impoverished, or displaced during the Mazdakite movement. Qavid abolished the office of Artesh Dharansalar, demoted the chief Zoroastrian clergy, and restructured the military command by replacing the general with 4 regional commanders. He also diminished the authority of the prime minister through the creation of the new office of Esteb, the chief of the royal household. Alongside these political reforms, Qavid introduced a new tax system based on land ownership and a more equitable assessment of income. This system, later fully implemented by his son and successor Khosrow I and Yushirvan, significantly eroded the power of the entrenched nobility, elevated the lower aristocracy, and brought them closer to the monarchy. Qavid further reclaimed the exclusive right to designate his heir. In his later years, Qavid carefully selected his son Khosrow. Khosrow was chosen over another son, Khos, who was aligned with the remnants of the Mazdakite faction. To secure succession and foster peace, Qavid sought Byzantine Emperor Justin's guardianship for Khosrow. Justin rejected this, fearing it might give Persia claims over the Roman Empire. This diplomatic failure sparked renewed hostilities, leading to a protracted war marked by shifting fortunes. Qavid's reign ended with his death in 531, leaving a legacy of restored central authority, military engagements, and social reforms for his son's reign. Khosrow I and Ushirovin inherited a kingdom that still simmered with internal tensions. Though some nobles supported his claim, others conspired against him, prompting the new king to suppress these threats, including the final elimination of the Mazdakite state movement and its leader. Determined to heal social wounds, Khosrow offered economic support, land, and legal security to those affected. His reign marked a period of profound transformation. He completed the fiscal reforms begun by his father, and centralized power by turning feudal lords into salaried officials loyal to the crown. The tax system was overhauled to ensure fairness, regularity, and relief for the poor. Taxation became more predictable based on land productivity, and the oppressive death tax was abolished. With domestic stability secured, Khosrow turned to foreign affairs. He formed a crucial alliance with the expanding Turkish Empire under Koganistami, jointly defeating the Hephthalite Empire that had long troubled Persia's eastern borders. Although this victory freed Persia from Hephthalite dominance, it brought new challenges as the Turks emerged as powerful rivals. Khosrow I earned the epithet Enushirvan, meaning of the immortal soul, reflecting his enduring reputation as a just and wise ruler. Both Persian and even some Byzantine sources admired him as a lover of philosophy and knowledge. He believed that justice was the divine foundation of kingship and that it should be administered impartially to all. While faithful to Zoroastrianism, he promoted religious tolerance, offering protection and freedom of worship to other faiths. His reign saw the translation of philosophical, medical, and astronomical works from Greek, Syriac, and Indian sources, fostering a climate of intellectual curiosity. One of Khosrow's most significant contributions was the compilation of the Avesta, a royal chronicle that later influenced Islamic-era historiography. The death of Khosrow I marked a significant turning point in Sassanian history, as the forces of the old aristocracy and the powerful Zoroastrian clergy sought to reclaim their waning influence. His successor Hormozd IV, who reigned from 579 to 589, proved to be an educated but proud and suspicious ruler. Declaring himself a champion of the common people, Hormozd enraged the clergy by rejecting their demands to limit the rights of non-Zoroastrians. At the empire's borders, chaos reigned. Arab tribes raided the western frontiers, and nomadic groups invaded the eastern province of Khorasan. The distinguished general Bahram Choban, hailing from an ancient lineage, scored victories against these invaders. He was driven to rebellion by Hormuz's distrust and ingratitude. Hormuz was deposed and executed, clearing the path for Bahram to proclaim himself king. Royalists rallied around Hormuz's son, Khosrow II, who secured Byzantine support and reclaimed the throne. Khosrow's initial reign was marked by opulence, lavish palaces, and the patronage of the arts. He showed favor to Christians, notably through his relationship with his Christian wife Shirin. He contributed richly to Christian churches and constructed architectural marvels like the palaces at Ctesiphon and Dastagard. Despite this cultural flourishing, his reign descended into extravagance and autocracy. Khosrow exacted heavy taxes. The murder of his Byzantine ally, Emperor Maurice, in 602 prompted Khosrow II to launch a full-scale war against Byzantium. Persian armies under generals like Sharbaraz achieved spectacular conquests, capturing vast swaths of Byzantine territory, including Jerusalem in 614. However, Khosrow's refusal to negotiate peace with the new Byzantine emperor, Heraclius, proved disastrous. Heraclius launched counteroffensives that devastated Persian holdings, culminating in the sack of key cities. This decisive campaign left Persia weakened and vulnerable. In 628, Khosrow II was overthrown in a palace coup and executed. His son Kavad II secured peace by returning all conquered territories, but soon died in a plague that also decimated the population. Amid this disintegration, external threats intensified. The Turks and Khazars ravaged borderlands. Heraclius, the Byzantine emperor, meddled in Persian politics, and most significantly, Arab tribes, newly unified under Islam, began incursions into Persian territory. A new chapter was about to begin, and it would be their most defining one yet. By the mid-7th century, the ancient fire of Persia had dimmed. The mighty Sassanid Empire, once a rival to Rome and a beacon of art and architecture, was crumbling. In its place, a new power emerged, and it was unlike any before it. This is the story of how Iran was conquered and how it conquered back, not with swords, but with culture, intellect, and poetry. The Battle of Al-Qadisiyah, fought in 636 CE, is one of the most decisive military engagements in Middle Eastern history. It marked the beginning of the end for the Sassanid Empire and the rise of Islamic rule in Persia. By the early 7th century, the Sassanid Empire was already weakened by decades of costly wars against the Byzantine Empire. Internal political instability and economic exhaustion further plagued the empire. This left them vulnerable to the rising Arab Muslim forces led by the Rashidun Caliphate. They sought to spread their influence beyond the Arabian Peninsula. After successful campaigns in Syria and the Levant, Muslim armies turned eastward towards Mesopotamia. These rich provinces were under Sassanian control. Muslim forces commanded by Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas launched a series of raids. They captured key territories, threatening Persian rule. In response, Yazdegerd III, the young and last monarch of the Sassanid dynasty, ordered a large-scale mobilization, aimed to push back the Arab invasion. The Sassanid army was placed under the command of Rostam Farrokhzad, one of the empire's most renowned generals. The two sides eventually met near Al-Qadisiyah, located near the Euphrates River in present-day Iraq. The battle raged over 4 intense days. The Sassanid army was formidable, boasting elite heavy cavalry, known as cataphracts, and a terrifying army of war elephants. These served as both psychological and physical weapons in battles. They also held numerical superiority over the Muslim forces. However, the Arab Muslim army was highly motivated, driven by religious fervor, guided by superior mobility and skill. The Muslims employed clever strategies to counter the war elephants, such as blinding them and targeting their handlers, ultimately neutralizing one of the Persians' key advantages. The turning point came when Rostam Farrokhzad was killed. Historical sources say he was either slain in battle or drowned while attempting to flee, plunging the Sassanid army into chaos. The defeat at Qadisiyah was catastrophic for the Sassanids. It led to the rapid fall of Ctesiphon, the imperial capital of Persia, which was abandoned and soon occupied by the Muslim forces. The loss of Ctesiphon not only stripped the Sassanids of their political and administrative center, but also signaled the collapse of their capacity to wage an effective defense. In the aftermath of Qadisiyah, Yazdegerd III fled eastward, seeking refuge and support from various provincial governors and tribal leaders within the empire. Despite his royal title, Yazdegerd's authority was largely symbolic by this time. Another side effect of their decentralization. Many regional rulers and military commanders either refused to support him or made their own arrangements with the advancing Muslim armies. The final blow came in 642 CE at the Battle of Nahavand, often referred to as the Victory of Victories. The remaining Sassanid forces were decisively defeated, effectively sealing the fate of the empire. Yazdegerd III's final years were marked by a desperate flight from province to province, as he attempted to rally support first in Media, then Persia, Kerman, and finally in Merv, located in what is now Turkmenistan. His efforts were in vain, as his local rulers were more interested in self-preservation than in imperial restoration. In 651 CE, Yazdegerd was betrayed and murdered, reportedly by a local miller or provincial governor. His death brought an end to over 4 centuries of Sassanid rule and completed the Arab-Muslim conquest of Persia. Conversion to Islam, however, was neither immediate nor universal. It unfolded gradually, often accompanied by violence. Zoroastrian sacred texts were burned. Priests were executed, and the people were warned. Zoroastrians were allowed to survive initially by paying a poll tax called jizya. This leniency enabled many Persians to retain their ancient religion for several generations. By the 10th century, Zoroastrians who refused to convert sometimes chose exile over submission. Many migrated to India, where their descendants became known as the Parsis. Those who stayed faced increased marginalization and economic pressures. The conversion to Islam introduced sweeping changes to Persian society, regulating all aspects of their lives. Fire temples gave way to mosques, Zoroastrian rites and rituals vanished, and burial practices shifted to conform to Islamic norms. The Arabic language carried along with the new faith infiltrated Persian vocabulary, particularly in religious, legal, and scholarly contexts. Though Persian remained the language of everyday life and poetry and cultural expression, the Arab conquest also brought significant demographic changes. Many Arab tribes settled in Persia, particularly in Khorasan, which became a launching pad for further invasions into Central Asia. Yet rather than transforming Persia into an Arab land, the opposite often happened. Arabs who settled in Persia were slowly absorbed into the Iranian ethnicity. Generations later, it became hard to distinguish Arab from Persian. The true transformation occurred not in ethnicity but in culture and religion. For over 2 centuries after the conquest, Persia was ruled by Arab governors, first under the Rashidun and Umayyads, and later the Abbasids. The Umayyads, with their strong Arab tribal identity, treated non-Arab converts known as Mawali as second-class citizens. This led many Persian converts to attach themselves to Arab tribes for social identity and legal protection. One of the most striking features of the Islamic period in Iran is the remarkable endurance of the Persian language and identity. Despite centuries of Arab rule and the profound changes Islam introduced, Persia never succumbed to Arabization as Egypt, Syria, and Mesopotamia did. This resilience has fascinated scholars and is often attributed to the deep-rooted cultural and literary traditions of Iran. Several movements erupted as a result of Persian discontent under Umayyad oppression. The Abbasid Revolution led by Abu Muslim in Khorasan was supported by many Persians. It marked a turning point that allowed for greater Persian influence within the Islamic world. The Abbasid Revolution, which many Persians supported against the ethnically biased Umayyads, also accelerated Islamic civilization. The Umayyad Caliphate ruled the Islamic Empire for over a century, seen by many as Arab-centric and biased against non-Arab Muslims like the Persians. Many Muslims felt they had strayed from core Islamic principles and had become worldly. This discontent fueled a desire for change. The Abbasid family, descendants of the Prophet Muhammad's uncle, led a revolution. They sought to restore Islamic principles. The revolution culminated at the Battle of Zab in 750 CE, where the Umayyad Caliph, Marwan, was decisively defeated. The Shubia movement emerged early in the Abbasid period, rooted in the Quranic idea that all people are equal in God's eyes. It served as a cultural and literary assertion of equality, sometimes even of the superiority of Persian traditions. This movement was championed by Persian intellectuals, poets, and writers who sought to preserve their heritage. It was later institutionalized by powerful dynasties like the Samanids, Buyids, and Ghaznavids, solidifying its influence. Persian intellectuals like Ibn al-Muqaffa and Abu Hayyan al-Tawidi significantly contributed, challenging notions of Arab superiority. Though controversial, the movement succeeded in preserving Persian heritage and elevating it within the broader Islamic world. Abu Muslim, who led the Abbasid Revolution, was assassinated by the Abbasid Caliph Mansur, a tragic end to a powerful figure. His death sparked a series of revolts, including those led by Muqana in Transoxiana and Baba Khorramdin in Azerbaijan. These tensions laid the groundwork for the eventual rise of independent Persian dynasties, marking a new era. These dynasties would not only preserve but also revitalize Iranian culture within an Islamic framework, creating a unique blend. Persian administrative models, literature, and artistic achievements flourished under later rulers, ensuring Iran's distinct identity. The first significant Persian dynasty after the Arab conquest was the Tahirids, marking a pivotal moment. Their founder, Tahirbi Hussein, nicknamed the Ambidextrous, proved his military prowess by helping Caliph Mu'mun defeat his brother Aymon. As a reward, Tahir was appointed governor of Khorasan with full authority, establishing his rule. The Tahirids governed until Yaqub of the Safavids overthrew them and took their capital, Nishapur. The Safavids rose from humble origins in Sistan, a rugged region in eastern Iran, demonstrating resilience. Their founder, Yaqub ibn Aleth al-Safar, was the son of a coppersmith, embodying a rise from common roots. He had no interest in the Arabic language and preferred Persian, sparking one of the earliest known Persian language poetic works. When a court poet composed a Persian qasida in his honor, Yaqub expanded his power, taking Kerman, Khorasan, and Fars. He even challenged the Abbasid Caliph militarily, but was defeated near the Tigris, a significant setback. His brother Amr eventually lost the family's broader holdings to the rising Samanids, confining Safavid rule to Sistan. The Samanids came from Transoxiana and were descended from Saman Kuda, a landowner from Balkh who converted to Islam. His descendants were appointed governors by the Abbasids, and in time the family established a powerful and culturally significant dynasty. The greatest Samanid ruler, Ibn Ahmed, expanded the empire by defeating the Safavids and consolidating control over Central Asia and Khorasan. The Samanid capital, Bukhara, became a major center of Persian culture, attracting scholars, poets, and scientists. Famous figures such as Avicenna, Biruni, and poets like Rudaki flourished under their rule. They sponsored works that helped lay the foundation for Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, the Persian national epic. The Shahnameh, also known as the Book of Kings, was completed around 1010 CE. In over 50,000 verses, Ferdowsi told the story of Iran from mythical creation to the fall of the Sassanids. Written entirely in Persian without a single Arabic loan word, it preserved ancient Iranian history and mythology. It also solidified Persian as a literary language distinct from Arabic, despite Islamization. By the 9th century, a new language emerged known as New Persian. It was written in Arabic script but retained Iranian grammar and structure. As the Persian language re-emerged, so did Persian genius. During the Islamic Golden Age, Persian thinkers shaped the foundations of science, medicine, mathematics, and philosophy. Avicenna, born in Bukhara, wrote the Canon of Medicine, a work studied across Europe and Asia for centuries. Al-Khwarizmi, often considered the father of algebra, gave the world algorithms and reshaped mathematics forever. By the late 9th century, the power of the Abbasid caliphs had sharply declined. This led to a fractured political landscape in Iran. Dozens of regional powers emerged, vying for control. This era saw almost constant warfare, destruction of cities, and widespread suffering. Major urban centers like Nishapur, Merv, Bukhara, Ray Hamadan, and Isfahan faced repeated invasions, sieges, and devastation. The chaos contributed to the destruction of countless Persian cultural treasures, monuments, libraries, and works of art. Long before the Mongol and Timurid invasions, Iran became a fragmented kingdom ruled by numerous competing dynasties, such as the Safavids in Sistan, Samanids in Transoxiana and Khorasan, Zirids along the Caspian coast. Buyids in western and central Iran, Kakawids, Ghaznavids, Zaydi rulers in northern Iran, Javanshars, Hashemids in the Caucasus, Dalfids in western Iran, Seljuks and their successor Atabags. These would eventually dominate the region and others. This fragmentation explains Iran's lack of political stability. For centuries, Iran suffered extensive cultural losses. The Ghaznavid dynasty emerged as the Safavid Empire crumbled. A talented general named Mahmud of Ghazni seized the opportunity. In 1005, he defeated the last Safavid ruler and took control of Khorasan. His Turk allies, the Karakhanids, occupied the northern lands of the Sassanids. Mahmud wasn't just a brilliant military leader, he was also a devout Sunni Muslim with big ambitions. After securing his northern borders, he set his sights on India. His military campaigns across Punjab, Sindh, and as far as Gwalior were framed as religious crusades to spread Islam, but they also brought immense wealth through plunder and tribute. His most famous and controversial act was the looting of the Somnath Temple in western India around 1021 to 1026 CE. His military successes earned him titles from the Abbasid Caliph, including Helper of the Faith and Right Hand of the State. While some modern historians suspect his real motives were more about wealth than religion, he is still celebrated as a champion of Islam. Culturally, Mahmud's court in Ghazni was a beacon of Persian culture. Though the Ghaznavids were Turk by origin, they became deeply Persianized through their connections to the Samanid cultural world. Poets like Faruqi Manukiri and Unshuri flourished in his court, marking one of the golden ages of Persian poetry. After Mahmud, the dynasty began to crumble. His son Madid struggled to keep the empire intact, especially when faced with the rise of the Seljuk Turks. They decisively defeated the Ghaznavids in 1040. The once great Ghaznavid Empire shrank, eventually surviving only in parts of India until they were swept away by the Ghurids in 1186. Still, throughout their history, the Ghaznavids remained staunch patrons of Persian art and literature, even more so than some Iranian dynasties. While the Ghaznavids were rising in the east, two other dynasties, the Ziarids and the Bedes, held sway in parts of northern and western Iran. The Ziarids came from the Elamite people of the Caspian Mountains, a region known for its resistance to early Islamic conquest. Under Mardavij ibn Ziyar, they carved out an impressive domain with Ray as their capital. Mardavij even captured Hamadan and reached near the borders of Iraq. But his reign ended abruptly when his Turk mercenaries assassinated him. Though the dynasty survived in a limited form in Tabaristan and Gorgan, it never regained real power. The Buyids, also Elamites, rose from the ranks of the Zirid military. The three brothers, Ali, Hassan, and Ahmad, each claimed different regions of Iran: Fars, Gibel, Kerman, and Khuzestan. By 945, the Buyids had entered Baghdad, deposed the caliph, and took control of the Abbasid Caliphate. They never abolished the caliphate, but instead ruled as Emir al-Umara, the real power behind the throne. The greatest Buyid ruler, Azod-Alola, brought stability and prosperity, ruling over one of the richest courts of the Islamic world. Despite being Shiite Muslims, the Bedes maintained an uneasy balance with the Sunni religious establishment. They opposed the Ismaili Fatimids in Egypt and gradually helped Twelvism develop into a more moderate and philosophical faith. Though deeply involved in Islamic politics, the Buyids did not forget their Persian heritage. They revived ancient Iranian festivals and titles like Shahunshah, King of Kings, tracing their lineage to the Sassanids. Some Buyid princes even bore ancient Persian names like Rostam and Purusha. However, when it came to literature, the Buyids leaned more toward Arabic culture, supporting Arabic poets like Al-Mutanabi. Ultimately, the Buyid dynasty suffered from internal rivalries and constant wars with neighboring powers. Their grip on Baghdad ended when the Sunni Seljuks entered the city in 1055, and the remaining Buyid territories fell shortly after. The 10th and 11th centuries were a time of political fragmentation in Persia, but also cultural flourishing. Persian identity and culture emerged resilient and enriched, laying the foundations for the Persian world of later centuries. In the centuries to come, new empires would rise, but the Persian heart would remain. By the 11th century, Iran ceased to be an empire. but was a mosaic of fragmented kingdoms united by common culture. The Iranians had endured conquest upon conquest, and now it was time for a renaissance. But not before another invasion, the Turk invasion. The Seljuk Turks invaded Iran in the 11th century CE, transforming not just Iran, but the wider Islamic world. The Seljuks were originally a Turkic nomadic tribe from the Central Asian steppes, part of the broader Oghuz Turk Confederation. In the 10th century, they began migrating westward into the Persian Islamic world, particularly into Khorasan. At the time, the Eastern Islamic world was dominated by the Ghaznavid Empire, a Persianized Turkic dynasty. The Ghaznavids, though powerful, were stretched thin and vulnerable. The Seljuks under Tughril Beg and Chagri Beg began by raiding into Khorasan in the early 11th century. Their mobility, cavalry-based warfare, and unity gave them an advantage over their rivals. The turning point came with the Battle of Dandanakan in 1040 CE near Merv, in modern-day Turkmenistan. The Seljuks decisively defeated the Ghaznavid army, securing Khorasan and laying the foundation for their control over Iran. The Ghaznavids retreated eastward to India, leaving Iran open to Seljuk domination. The Seljuks then entered Nishapur and gradually moved westward, eventually entering Ray and Isfahan, which became the Seljuk capital. In 1055 CE, Tughril Beg, leader of the Seljuk Turks, marched into Baghdad and declared himself protector of the Caliph. He relegated the Abbasid caliphs to mere figureheads and took control of the entire empire. This marked the rise of the Great Seljuk Empire. At its height, it stretched from Central Asia through Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Anatolia. Although Turkic in origin, the Seljuks adopted Persian language, culture, and administrative systems. Persian became the official language of government, while Arabic remained the language of religion. Behind every empire stands a visionary. For the Seljuks, it was Nizam al-Mulk, their grand vizier. He once wrote that a ruler without a scholar is like a fortress without defenders. Nizam al-Mulk spearheaded the construction of Nizamiya madrasas in Nishapur, Baghdad, and Isfahan. These grand institutions nurtured theology, jurisprudence, philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy. One prominent student was al-Ghazali, whose work bridged jurisprudence and mysticism. Nizam al-Mulk also authored the Siyasatna, a manual of statecraft. It balanced justice, administration, and virtue. His assassination in 1092 heralded political instability. But his legacy endured as thousands of scholars, judges, and administrators trained in the Nizamiya network. They helped shape Islamic civilization. The Seljuk era also witnessed a Persian cultural renaissance. With the flourishing of Persian poetry, philosophy, science, and architecture, scholars like Omar Khayyam and poets like Enveri rose to prominence. Architecturally, the Seljuks left behind mosques, madrasas, and caravanserai, many of which survive in Iran and Anatolia. By the late 11th and 12th centuries, the Seljuk Empire began to fragment. This was due to internal rivalries and succession disputes. Different branches of the Seljuk family ruled in Anatolia, like the Seljuks of Rum, Iraq, and Khorasan. While the Seljuks were dealing with their internal battles, the Islamic world was battling with the Crusaders. The Crusades were a series of religious wars launched by Western European Christian powers. Between the 11th and 13th centuries CE, aimed at recapturing Jerusalem and other holy sites. They were framed as holy missions sanctioned by the Catholic Church, blending religious fervor, military conquest, and political ambition. The First Crusade was called by Pope Urban II in 1095 and led to the establishment of Crusader states in the Levant. Subsequent crusades followed over the next 2 centuries, involving battles, massacres, and shifting territorial control. Although the heart of the Crusades was in the Levant, their indirect impact on Iran was felt. For starters, Iran was geographically peripheral to the main theaters of Crusader activity. Over time, figures like Saladin inspired calls for defensive jihad against the Crusaders. Persia, as part of the broader Islamic world, was influenced by this renewed religious mobilization. The Sunni revival of the Seljuks, which had started earlier in the 11th century, gained further momentum. Defending Islam became a shared cause. It wasn't all negative, though, as silk, spices, and precious goods from Persia found eager markets. These goods found markets in Crusader-controlled areas and later in Europe, enhancing the role of Persian trade routes. For Persia, the Mongol invasions of the 13th century are often seen as the greatest catastrophe to hit the Islamic world, destroying on a scale rarely seen before or since. The Mongols, originally nomadic tribes from the steppes of Mongolia, were united under Chinggis Khan in 1206, through military brilliance and sheer ruthlessness. Chinggis and his generals created the largest contiguous empire in world history, stretching from China to Eastern Europe. The Mongols followed shamanistic beliefs and lived by an unwritten set of laws called the Yasa. The Yasa governed everything from warfare to social order. As they expanded westward, they encountered various religions, such as Manichaeism, Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam, and absorbed many cultural influences. When the Mongols arrived in Persia, the once great Abbasid Caliphate was in decline, and local powers were unable to resist. The Khwarezmian dynasty was unable to resist the Mongol onslaught. The Mongols under Chinggis Khan demanded submission. Cities that refused faced utter annihilation. Cities like Bukhara, Samarkand, Nishapur, Herat, Ray, and Marv were burned to the ground. Their populations were massacred. Later, under Hulagu Khan, the Mongols struck the heart of the Islamic world. Hulagu crushed the powerful Ismaili sect, also known as the Assassins, and then marched on Baghdad. Baghdad, the seat of the Abbasid Caliphate. Baghdad was sacked, and Caliph al-Mustasim was killed, ending centuries of Abbasid rule and effectively decapitating the spiritual and political unity of the Muslim world. Hulagu established the Ilkhanate ruling Persia, Iraq, Anatolia, and the Caucasus as a vassal of the Great Khan in Mongolia. Initially, the Ilkhan rulers were Buddhist, Christian, or shamanistic, but by the reign of Ghazan Khan, the Mongols of Persia had converted to Islam. Ghazan not only embraced the faith, but also introduced sweeping reforms, aimed at stabilizing the economy, administration, and justice. His decrees, known as Ghazan's Yaza, sought to curb corruption and protect ordinary people from abuse. His successors, including Abu Said Bahadur, can continue this process, becoming great patrons of Persian art, architecture, and literature. Cities like Tabriz and Sultania flourished under their rule. The Ilkhanate oversaw a cultural revival with viziers like Rashid al-Din. Rashid al-Din, the author of the monumental Jami al-Tawarik, playing key roles in governance and scholarship. Yet after Abu Said died in 1335, the Ilkhanate fragmented into rival factions, and Persia once again descended into chaos. Into this political vacuum stepped Timur, known in the West as Tamerlane, of Turco-Mongol descent. Timur was not a direct descendant of Genghis Khan, but claimed legitimacy through marriage ties and by invoking Mongol heritage. From his capital in Samarkand, he launched relentless military campaigns. Timur's wars were as brutal as those of the early Mongols. He conquered Khorasan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Armenia, Syria, and India. In 1398, he sacked Delhi, killing over 100,000 people. In Syria, he destroyed Aleppo and Damascus. He even captured the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid after the Battle of Ankara, humiliating a rising Muslim power. Timur, despite claiming to fight for Islam, was notoriously cruel. His massacres of cities, even those that had surrendered, were legendary. Isfahan and Baghdad were both reduced to ruins, with tens of thousands of inhabitants slaughtered. Unlike Genghis Khan, Timur was not a gifted administrator. His empire was built on bloodshed and plunder, not sustainable governance. However, his descendants, the Timurids, were among the most artistic and cultured dynasties in Islamic history. His son Shah stabilized much of the empire and was a patron of the arts. His grandson, Ulugh Beg, was a brilliant astronomer who built a famous observatory in Samarkand and produced astronomical tables used for centuries. Another descendant, Bey-Sunkar, was a poet, calligrapher, and patron of the arts, commissioning one of the most beautiful versions of Ferdowsi Shanum. Despite Timur's savagery, his dynasty left behind a golden legacy in Persian architecture, calligraphy, miniature painting, and science. The Mongol invasions and the rise of Timur were devastating, but also transformative for Persia and the Middle East. While entire cities were wiped out and populations decimated, these conquests also brought a renaissance. Persia came under unified rule after centuries of fragmentation. There was a blending of Mongol, Persian, Islamic, and Chinese influences. This would prepare the ground for later dynasties like the Safavids, who would shape the modern identity of Iran. After Timur died in 1405, Shah, Timur's son, shifted the capital of the Timurid Empire from Samarkand to Herat. The city of Herat, thus, emerged as a beacon of the Persian Renaissance. His wife, Gaharshad, was a patron of the arts and commissioned several monumental buildings, including mosques, madrasas, and the famous Musalla complex of Herat. There was a revival and flourishing of Persian culture, poetry, calligraphy, and painting. Herat hosted a flourishing school of miniature painting, where artists like Kamal Uddin Basad created poetic masterpieces that still take the breath away. The city attracted poets, philosophers, astronomers, and physicians. Many wrote in Persian, maintaining the transition from Arabic to New Persian as the language of elite culture. In courts across Persia, South Asia, and Central Asia, Persian poets recited their verses. Painters illustrated epic tales, and scientists pursued knowledge. Forging an empire of art after centuries of fragmentation, Timurid artistic idioms flowed into Mughal India. Persian became the official court and literary language from Delhi to Samarkand, taught in schools, written on tombstones, and sung in courts. Through marriages, scholars, and craftsmen, Persian culture unified a new Islamic world. By 1500, even without political unity, Persia's contribution to culture, linguistics, arts, architecture, and religion was immeasurable. Persia lay fractured, yet it united the world through culture. In Iran and beyond, motifs of fire, Vulcan, and foliage spoke the language of resilience and continuity. They foretold the dawn of a new age, shaped by foreign conquest, intellectual revival, and visionary art. The final chapter of Timurid rule in Persia occurred under Sultan Hussein b Mansur Bukhara, who ruled from 1469 to 1506, a great-grandson of Timur. Sultan Hussein presided over a remarkable cultural renaissance centered in the city of Herat. Under his leadership, Herat became one of the most celebrated intellectual and artistic centers of the Islamic world. Renowned for its poets, painters, architects, and scholars, Sultan Hussein took considerable care to foster the arts and sciences. He amassed an extensive royal library and provided stipends to students to encourage the pursuit of knowledge and literary refinement. One of the most influential figures of his court was his vizier Mir Elisha Nevi, a distinguished man of letters. He composed poetry in both Persian and Chagatai Turkish, earning him the title of the father of Chagatai poetry. Sultan Hussein's court attracted many luminaries, including the renowned poet, mystic, and scholar Abdal Rahman Jami. His literary and philosophical works left an enduring impact, not only in Persia, but also in the wider Islamic world. This period is often seen as the last glowing phase of classical Persian poetry. Another notable figure was Kamel Alan Bozid, considered the greatest Persian painter of the Islamic period. His exquisite miniatures and refined artistic style set new standards in Persian art. The celebrated historian Mir Quand, author of the comprehensive history Rajat-e-Asafa, was also part of this vibrant intellectual community. Despite these achievements, the Timurid dynasty could not withstand external pressures mounting on its borders. Soon after Sultan Hussein's death, the dynasty ended due to repeated invasions by the Uzbeks. This marked the close of an illustrious chapter in Persian history, leaving a political vacuum. During this decline, Persia witnessed the rise of two rival Turkmen dynasties, the Karakoyunlu, or Black Sheep Turkmen, and the Aq Koyunlu, or White Sheep Turkmen. Both confederations originated from Oghuz Turk tribes, propelled westward by Mongol invasions. The Karakoyunlu first established themselves in northern Iraq and around Lake Van. They were known for military prowess, controlling western Persia, Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. Leaders like Kara Yusuf and Jahan Shah expanded territories through campaigns and alliances. Though predominantly warriors, they were also patrons of art and architecture, evidenced by the remains of the Blue Mosque in Tabriz, a testament to their cultural contributions. The rise of the Aq Koyunlu marked a new phase in Turkmen dominance. Unlike their rivals, the Aq Koyunlu were initially more cooperative with external powers. Including Timur, their most distinguished ruler was Uzan Hasan, an accomplished military commander. He was also a shrewd statesman who extended his authority over much of Persia. He forged alliances with Western powers like Venice to counterbalance the Ottomans. Through marriage ties with the Byzantine Principality of Trebizond, he cultivated diplomatic relationships. These distinguished his reign from that of other Turkmen rulers. Despite his skills, he was ultimately defeated by the Ottomans in 1473, a clear sign of rising Ottoman supremacy in the region. His successors struggled to maintain power, unable to resist a new potent force. The emergence of the Safavid movement within Persia. The rise of the Safavid dynasty in the early 16th century marks a transformative period. This era witnessed the creation of a unified Persian state, the establishment of 12 or Shia Islam as the official religion, and a cultural and economic renaissance that left an enduring legacy on Iran and beyond. The fall of the Aq Koyunlu came at the hands of Shah Ismail I, the charismatic leader of the Safavid Sufi order. Ismail capitalized on the widespread popularity of Shiite Islam among Turkmen tribes, enabling him to capture Tabriz in 1501. He proclaimed himself the Shah of Iran, marking the foundation of the Safavid dynasty and ending Turkmen rule. This transformed Iran's religious identity by establishing Twelver Shi'ism as the state religion, ushering in a new era. The Safavid origins are somewhat obscure, believed to have Kurdish roots, though they became fully Turkified over time. Originally Sunni, the order gradually adopted Shi'ism and developed a militant character under Sofi al-Din's descendants. It attracted support from Turkish and Turkmen tribes, whose devotion was crucial to the dynasty's rise. The Safavid state was founded by the young and charismatic Ismail, who became head after his father, Haydar's death. Adored by his Qizilbash followers, known for their red headgear, Ismail launched military campaigns to avenge his father. In 1501, at age 14, he captured Tabriz at the Battle of Shar and declared himself Shah. He established Twelver Shi'ism as the official faith, compelling conversion, often through force. His swift military successes extended Safavid rule over Persia and prevented Uzbek incursions from the northeast. However, Ismail's belief in his invincibility suffered a blow in 1514 at the Battle of Chaldiran. The Safavids, viewing firearms as dishonorable, were decisively defeated by superior Ottoman weaponry. Though Ottomans occupied parts of Azerbaijan temporarily, harsh winters limited their conquest. The psychological impact on Ismail was profound. He withdrew from public life, descending into melancholy. He never again led his army in battle before his death in 1524, marking a tragic end to his reign. Ismail's reign exposed a persistent challenge: the tension between the Qizilbash tribal warriors, men of the sword, and Persian bureaucrats, men of the pen. As Ismail sought to centralize power, he needed competent Persian administrators to balance the unruly and ambitious Qizilbash chiefs. This rivalry often descended into violence, exemplified by the assassination of Persian vizier Mesa Shah Hussein by Qizilbash factions. The same delicate balance persisted under his successor, Shah Tahmasp, who inherited the throne at the age of 10. Tahmasp, though neither a brilliant administrator nor a military genius, proved to be a determined and pious ruler. Despite frequent Ottoman invasions and persistent Uzbek threats, he maintained Persia's territorial integrity and firmly entrenched Shi'ism. His reign also marked the beginning of friendly, though complex, relations with the Mughal Empire in India. When Mughal ruler Humayun sought refuge in Persia, Tahmaspi offered support on condition of Humayun's conversion to Shi'ism. Nevertheless, the diplomatic and cultural ties between the Safavids and the Mughals endured beyond this episode. Following Tahmasp's death, the Safavid state fell into a period of instability. Essel II briefly seized power, but proved to be a cruel and paranoid ruler, ruthlessly eliminating royal family members. His successor, Muhammad Qutbanda, was an indecisive figure, allowing Qazelbash factions and court intrigue to spiral unchecked. The Safavid realm teetered on the brink of collapse until the emergence of Shah Abbas I in 1588. A monarch whose leadership would revitalize Persia and restore Safavid power. The Safavid Empire reached its peak under Shah Abbas I, known as Shah Abbas the Great, who reigned from 1588 to 1629. Recognizing the fragility of Safavida's authority, Shah Abbas embarked on an ambitious program of centralization and reform. To curb the power of the unruly Qazelbash tribal warriors, he established a professional army trained with modern firearms. He recruited slave soldiers called Gulams of Georgian, Circassian, and Armenian origin, who owed complete allegiance to the crown. Abbas also shifted the economic orientation of the empire by promoting international trade. He established relations with European powers such as England, Portugal, and the Dutch, turning Iran into a key player on the emerging global stage. Through strategic alliances and commercial expansion, he secured Iran's position as a cosmopolitan empire. One of Shah Abbas's most enduring legacies was his decision to make Isfahan the new capital of Iran. Under his direction, Isfahan underwent a breathtaking transformation, becoming one of the most magnificent cities in the Islamic world. The city was adorned with grand mosques, such as the Shah Mosque and the Sheikh Lotfallah Mosque, celebrated for their intricate tilework and soaring domes. The construction of the Naqshi Jahan Square, flanked by palaces, bazaars, and religious buildings, showcased the grandeur of the Safavid vision. Bridges like the Co Sapal and Caillou Bridge demonstrated advanced Persian engineering and aesthetic elegance. Simultaneously, the Safavid court sponsored the refinement of Persian miniature painting, blending vivid colors, intricate designs, and poetic storytelling. Isfahan symbolized the fusion of art, architecture, and imperial power, and remains an architectural jewel today. Another hallmark of Safavid prosperity was the flourishing of the Persian carpet industry. Persian carpets, a centuries-old tradition, reached new heights of artistic achievement during this period. Under royal patronage, workshops in cities like Kashan, Tabriz, and Isfahan produced carpets of extraordinary beauty. These carpets, featuring intricate floral patterns, vibrant dyes, and silk and wool craftsmanship, were highly prized. Prized in Europe, the Ottoman Empire, Mughal, India, and beyond, they became Iran's most famous artistic export. The carpet industry not only enriched the empire economically, but also played a crucial role in defining Persian aesthetic culture. To this day, Safavid-era carpets are considered masterpieces of textile art. The geopolitical reality of Safavid Iran was shaped by constant military conflict with its neighbors. The most persistent adversary was the Ottoman Empire, a powerful Sunni state that viewed Shia Iran as both a religious and territorial threat. The Ottoman-Safavid wars were fought intermittently over control of strategic regions like Mesopotamia and eastern Anatolia. These conflicts were not only about land, but also about the ideological rivalry between Sunni and Shia Islam. In the east, the Safavids faced continuous raids and wars with the Uzbeks, who sought to expand into Khorasan. Perhaps one of his most celebrated achievements was the expulsion of the Portuguese from the Persian Gulf with the assistance of the English East India Company. This not only restored Persian sovereignty over key maritime routes, but also bolstered the economy and trade. One of the defining features of Safavid governance was the integration of religious authority into the machinery of the state. The Safavids worked to institutionalize Twelver Shi'ism, making it not just a faith, but a cornerstone of political legitimacy. Clerics were given prominent roles in legal, educational, and governmental institutions. The Shia clergy helped enforce orthodoxy, suppress Sunni practices, and guide public morality. This marriage of mosque and monarchy became a permanent feature of Iranian governance, deeply influencing later eras. The elevation of Ashura commemorations, veneration of imams, and spread of Shia theological schools shaped a distinct Iranian religious identity. Despite its cultural brilliance and military achievements, the Safavid Empire began to unravel in the late 17th and early 18th centuries. The decline of the Safavid states began after Abba's death in 1629. His immediate successor, Shah Safi, perpetuated a legacy of violence by murdering or maiming potential rivals within the royal family. Although Abbas II, who ruled from 1642 to 1666, was a more capable and just monarch, subsequent rulers lacked both competence and resolve. Suleimani, preferring life in the harem to governing, presided over a period of relative peace, largely because Persia's neighbors were themselves weak. Nonetheless, foreign observers such as Jean Chardin noted signs of cultural and political stagnation. The final chapter of the Safavid dynasty came under Sultan Hussein, a feeble ruler dominated by religious clerics. His poor handling of Afghan discontent led to the revolt of the Ghilzai Afghans under Mahmud, culminating in the sack of Isfahan in 1722. This event marked the collapse of the Safavid dynasty and the end of one of Persia's most transformative eras. Corruption, court intrigue, and economic stagnation had gradually eroded the state's stability. Military discipline declined, and central authority weakened, leaving the empire vulnerable to external threats. The collapse of the Safavid dynasty ushered in a turbulent and fragmented period in Persian history. This period was characterized by foreign invasions, internal revolts, and the rise of new ruling houses. The immediate aftermath saw the emergence of Afghan tribes, long resistant to Safavid Shiite rule, seizing the opportunity to assert their independence. Safavid control over Kandahar had always been tenuous, often contested by the Mughal Empire of India. Under Shah Sultan Hussein, the Georgian governor of Kandahar, Gorjan Khan, ruled with oppressive severity. This fueled widespread resentment among the local Sunni Pashtun population. Mirwais, the influential leader of the Ghilzai tribe, capitalized on this discontent. He orchestrated a successful rebellion that led to the assassination of Gorjan Khan. With Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb's approval and Sunni religious backing, Mirwais declared Afghan independence. His son Mahmud carried the rebellion further, invading Persia and inflicting defeats upon Safavid forces. After a brutal siege, Mahmud's forces captured the Persian capital of Isfahan in 1722. This brought an end to Safavid sovereignty. For 14 years, Mahmud and his successor Ashraf ruled Persia. Their authority remained fragile, constantly challenged by internal disorder and foreign incursions. Sensing Persian vulnerability, the Ottoman Empire seized western provinces. Russia annexed territories along the Caspian coast. Simultaneously, the Abdalis, an Afghan tribe, took control of Herat, further fragmenting Persian territory. Amid this chaos, Tomasp II, a Safavid prince, proclaimed himself Shah in Kazvin. He sought to reclaim the throne with the assistance of Nader Koli, an ambitious military commander. Nader Koli hailed from the Afshar tribe in Khorasan. As they stepped into the 18th century, Iran entered a turbulent phase. It was marked by military ambition and political fragmentation. The dominant figure at the dawn of this era was Nader Shah, a military genius. He rose from humble origins to seize the Persian throne in 1736. Nader Shah's rise came amid the chaos following the collapse of the Safavid dynasty. He swiftly consolidated power and turned his gaze eastward. He embarked on one of the most audacious military campaigns in Persian history, the invasion of Mughal India. The rise of the Afsharids under Nadir Shah marked a brief but significant restoration of Persian power. The Afshar, a Turkman tribe, provided Nader with his initial base of support. Displaying extraordinary military skill, Nader defeated the remnants of the Afghan regime. He ended their brief rule over Persia. He then negotiated the return of Persian territories from Russia, and turned his military attention to the Ottomans, whom he successfully repelled. reclaiming lands lost in previous conflicts. By restoring Persian control over Herat and defeating both Afghan and Ottoman adversaries, Nader reasserted Persian sovereignty over much of the empire. In 1736, confident in his achievements, Nadir declared himself Shah, formally ending any lingering pretense of Safavid rule. Unlike the fervently Shiite Safavids, Nadir Shah's attachment to Shiism was tepid and politically pragmatic, seeking to reconcile Persia with its Sunni neighbors and mitigate sectarian hostilities. He proposed a vision of Shiism known as Jafari Shiism, named after the sixth Shiite Imam. He hoped it would be recognized by the Ottomans as a legitimate fifth school of Islam. Alongside the established Sunni legal schools, his proposal included fair treatment for Shiite pilgrims in Mecca and mutual renunciation of enslaving captives. However, the Ottomans rejected this, unwilling to legitimize Shiism or compromise their claim to religious leadership. In pursuit of wealth and prestige, Nadir Shah embarked on a dramatic military campaign into India in 1738. He defeated the Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah and sacked Delhi. In a catastrophic episode of widespread slaughter, the enormous treasure seized, including the core diamond and the peacock throne, enriched Persia. But it also stained his reputation with the memory of mass violence. On his return, he built a heavily fortified stronghold in Kalat to house his spoils. Yet the triumphs of Nadir Shah's early reign gave way to paranoia and cruelty as his mental state deteriorated. Increasingly tyrannical, he turned against his own family, ordering the blinding of his heir, Mirza. He imposed brutal punishments on perceived enemies, and his reign descended into despotism and terror. In 1747, he was assassinated by a coalition of Afar and Qajar leaders who feared for their lives. Nadir Shah's legacy is complex. He restored Persian territorial integrity and military prestige, but his unchecked despotism, heavy taxation, and violence undermined the stability he achieved. Following his death, the Afsharid state collapsed rapidly, disintegrating into a patchwork of competing local powers. His grandson Shah ruled Khorasan as a nominal figurehead under the sway of military commanders. This continued until the rise of aka Muhammad Khan, founder of the Qajar dynasty. He decisively ended the last vestiges of Afsharid rule. The period following the fall of the Safavids was one of profound upheaval. Nadir Shah's military genius briefly restored Persia's dominance, but his failure to establish durable institutions ensured his empire would not endure. The ensuing vacuum of power paved the way for the eventual rise of the Qajar dynasty. They would seek to reunify Persia under their own rule in the decades to come. In the aftermath of Nadir Shah's assassination, Persia witnessed the rise of the Zand dynasty. Led by Karim Khan Zand, unlike his predecessors, he was not interested in imperial conquest. Instead, he sought stability, peace, and economic recovery. Khan made Shiraz his capital, transforming it into a thriving urban center. He invested in public works, including caravanserais gardens, mosques, and bazaars, reviving trade and commerce. His era was characterized by relative tolerance and prosperity, earning him the title Vakil al-Raya. The Zand period, though short-lived, provided a respite from relentless wars and became a model for enlightened governance. However, the Zand dynasty lacked the military strength to unify Persia fully. Upon Karim Khan's death in 1779, the dynasty weakened. This paved the way for the rise of a new ruling family, the Qayas. By the late 18th century, the Qaya dynasty emerged. Under Aga Muhammad Khan Qaya, they faced the monumental task of reuniting a fractured Persia. They established Tehran as the new capital. They sought to centralize power. Despite their ambitions, the Qajaris were plagued by internal divisions and external pressures. Their rule coincided with the rise of European imperialism, particularly the expanding interests of Britain and Russia. The Qajar Shahs often found themselves at the mercy of these foreign powers, who exploited Persia's weakness for their own strategic and economic gain. The 19th century saw Persia become entangled in the so-called Great Game, the geopolitical struggle between the British and Russian empires. This was a struggle for dominance in Central Asia. Persia's strategic location made it a focal point of this rivalry. The Russo-Persian Wars culminated in devastating defeats for Persia. The Treaty of Turkmenchay of 1828 forced the Qajars to cede vast territories. These territories in the Caucasus included modern-day Armenia and Azerbaijan. These humiliations were compounded by Britain's economic dominance. This was particularly through control over Persian trade routes and later the exploitation of oil resources. The erosion of sovereignty led to growing resentment among the Persian populace. The monarchy's perceived weakness stoked nationalist sentiments. These sentiments would later fuel revolutionary movements. Throughout the 19th century, successive Qajar rulers granted extensive economic concessions. These enriched the elites, but impoverished the general population. Foreign control extended to Persia's tobacco, banking, and oil industries. This deepened economic dependency. This foreign domination, combined with governmental corruption and inefficiency, crippled the Persian economy. Local artisans and merchants suffered as imported goods flooded the market, leading to widespread unemployment and social discontent. The granting of a tobacco monopoly to a British company in 1890 sparked one of Iran's first mass protest movements. The tobacco protest united diverse segments of society: merchants, clerics, and ordinary citizens in opposition to foreign economic control. And government complicity, led by religious scholars, including the influential Mirza Hasan Shirazi. The protest took the form of a nationwide boycott. The movement's success forced the Shia government to revoke the concession, demonstrating for the first time that coordinated civil resistance could challenge royal authority. The tobacco protest is often regarded as a precursor to later revolutionary movements and the rise of political activism in Iran. Inspired by global trends of constitutionalism and democracy, Iran's constitutional revolution erupted in 1906. Protesters comprising merchants, intellectuals, religious leaders, and urban workers demanded the establishment of a constitution and a national assembly to limit royal authority. The constitutionalists achieved a historic victory with the signing of the Persian constitution and the establishment of the Majlis. This marked the birth of parliamentary politics in Iran. The revolution signaled a new era of political consciousness and aspirations for representative government. However, the young constitutional regime faced formidable obstacles. The Qajar monarchs remained resistant to genuine power sharing. Foreign powers continued to exert influence, and internal divisions among constitutionalists weakened the movement. By 1911, with the aid of Russian military intervention, the constitutional revolution was largely suppressed. The failure to fully implement constitutional reforms left Iran politically unstable and economically vulnerable. The Qajars continued to rule as figureheads while Britain and Russia carved the country into spheres of influence through secret agreements. World War I exacerbated Persia's woes. Though officially neutral, the country became a battleground for foreign armies. This led to famine, displacement, and political chaos. Efforts to modernize the military, economy, and education system faltered under weak leadership. As the 20th century dawned, Iran was a nation caught between tradition and modernity. The seeds of future upheaval had been planted, and the Qajar dynasty teetered on the brink of collapse. The Gunpowder era, spanning the Afsharid, Zand, and Qajar dynasties, was a period of profound transformation for Iran. It witnessed the rise and fall of powerful military leaders, the emergence of early nationalist movements, and the first steps toward constitutional governance. Yet it was also an era marked by foreign domination, economic exploitation, and political fragility. These centuries of struggle and resilience laid the groundwork for Iran's next seismic shifts in the 20th century. The story of Iran in the 20th century cannot be told without examining the profound impact of the Pahlavi dynasty, which ruled from 1925 to 1979. This era saw Iran's dramatic transformation from a traditional society into a modern nation-state. But it also laid the groundwork for the tensions that eventually erupted in the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The Pahlavi era began with Reza Khan, a military officer in Iran's Cossack Brigade, who staged a coup in 1921. By 1925, after consolidating power and marginalizing the weak Qajar dynasty, Reza Khan was crowned Reza Shah Pahlavi. The Qajar rulers had presided over decades of foreign domination, economic stagnation, and internal instability, leaving Iran fragmented and vulnerable. Reza harbored a profound desire to transform Persia into a modern state, capable of standing shoulder to shoulder with European powers. His vision of modernization was rooted in a strong sense of nationalism and a rejection of foreign interference, particularly British and Russian dominance. Reza Shah presented himself as a modernizer and a strong nationalist determined to restore Iran's sovereignty and dignity. He abolished the monarchy of the Qajars, centralizing authority in his own hands. This marked the beginning of sweeping changes, forging a new modern identity for Iran, distinct from imperial past and foreign domination. Determined to modernize Iran, Reza Shah initiated bold reforms that touched every aspect of Iranian society. One of his earliest moves was the establishment of secular courts, reducing the power of traditional Islamic legal authorities. He replaced Sharia courts with Western-style legal systems. In a symbolic and highly visible move, Reza Shah mandated Western dress codes. Men were required to wear European-style suits and hats, while women were encouraged and in some cases forced to abandon the veil. The 1936 Kashf Hijab decree formally banned veiling in public, a decision that provoked deep resentment among Iran's religious conservatives. He dismantled the corrupt Qajar bureaucracy, which had for generations served the interests of aristocrats and courtiers. The new civil service laws introduced merit-based appointments, competitive exams, and punishments for corruption. Furthermore, the outdated division of provinces was replaced with a more rational administrative structure based on economic and geographical logic. Reza Shah sought to build a cohesive nation-state under a strong central government. These reforms centralized authority in the hands of the state and increased its capacity to govern effectively. In the realm of education, Reza sought to break the grip of the Shiite clergy over schools, which for centuries had dictated the intellectual horizons of the country. The creation of secular schools, the expansion of teacher training institutions, and the establishment of the University of Tehran in 1935 laid the groundwork for a new generation trained in science, technology, and modern thought. The state-sponsored expansion of adult literacy programs and technical schools further advanced the educational revolution, while the introduction of scouting, Western music, and compulsory physical education helped cultivate a more secular modern citizenry. Reza Shah also focused on building Iran's infrastructure, roads, railways, schools, and factories. The creation of the Trans-Iranian Railway linked the north and south of the country, symbolizing national unity and progress. Education expanded and industrial development was encouraged, laying the foundation for a more modern economy in Persia. Public health and sanitation, long neglected, saw notable improvements under Reza Shah's reign. The establishment of the Pasteur Institute, licensing of physicians, and compulsory vaccination programs raised public health standards. However, challenges like water supply and sewage disposal remained unresolved, hindering full progress. One of Reza Shah's most significant achievements was creating a centralized standing army, the first since ancient Achaemenid times, determined to control rebellious tribal regions. He disbanded independent military units and established compulsory military service. With a modernized army, Reza succeeded in bringing restive provinces under state control, notably defeating Sheikh Khazal of Khuzestan. This was achieved despite British objections, highlighting his resolve against foreign influence. He also laid foundations for Iran's modest navy and air force, sending students abroad to study military sciences. These efforts ensured the future strength of the armed forces, a cornerstone of his modernization. Modest attempts were made to modernize agriculture, though progress was limited due to entrenched landlord interests. Throughout his reign, Reza Shah relied on foreign advisors from neutral nations like Denmark, Sweden, and the United States. This minimized direct foreign interference while harnessing technical expertise for modernization. His 1932 attempt to renegotiate Iran's oil concession with the British-led Anglo-Persian Oil Company revealed his nationalist fervor. It also showed the limitations of his power against foreign pressure. Facing threats of British military action, he reluctantly agreed to less favorable terms, an episode resonating in future Iranian politics. While initially surrounded by capable reformers, his later years were marked by paranoia and arbitrary arrests. The elimination of political allies and forced property acquisitions in Mazandaran further alienated segments of the population. His insistence on renaming Persia as Iran also alienated some, reflecting a complex legacy. The outbreak of World War II exposed Iran's strategic vulnerability, officially neutral. Iran's economic ties with Germany and Reza Shah's refusal to expel German nationals alarmed the Allies. In 1941, British and Soviet forces invaded Iran, swiftly overcoming Iranian resistance. This secured oil supplies and established crucial supply lines to the Soviet Union. Reza Shah was forced to abdicate in favor of his son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. This brought an end to his transformative, albeit autocratic reign. The new monarch, Mohammad Reza Shah, faced a turbulent political environment, inheriting a nation in flux. The early years of Mohammad Reza Shah's rule were marked by political instability, foreign intervention, and rising nationalist sentiment. The occupation of northern Iran by Soviet forces led to separatist movements in Azerbaijan and Kurdistan, supported by the Soviet Union. Prime Minister Ahmed Kavam skillfully negotiated the Soviet withdrawal by offering oil concessions, ultimately rejected by the Iranian magus. Amidst this turmoil, Mohammad Mossadegh emerged as a champion of Iranian nationalism, a passionate advocate for national sovereignty. Mossadegh galvanized popular support by pushing for the nationalization of the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. In 1951, he was appointed prime minister and implemented oil nationalization, provoking British and American opposition. In 1953, the economic crisis deepened, and fears of a communist takeover mounted. With British and American backing, Mohammad Reza Shah orchestrated the overthrow of Mossadegh in Operation Ajax. Spearheaded by the CIA and MI6, the coup restored the Shah's authority and sidelined the nationalist movement. Mossadegh was arrested, and Iran's brief democratic experiment came to an end. The Shah emerged as a Western-backed autocrat, increasingly dependent on foreign support. The 1953 coup remains a deeply controversial episode in Iranian history, a symbol of Western imperialism and interference. In the 1960s, Mohammad Reza Shah launched the ambitious White Revolution, transforming Iran into a modern industrial society. Significant initiatives included land reform, breaking the power of large landowners, and redistributing land to peasants. The White Revolution also advanced women's rights, granting them the right to vote and promoting their participation in education and the workforce. Additionally, the Shah invested heavily in education expansion, creating new universities and schools throughout the country. While these reforms aimed to modernize society, they alienated both the landed aristocracy and the clergy. In came Ruhollah Khomeini, an Iranian Shia cleric and revolutionary, outspoken against the White Revolution as anti-Islamic and oppressive. In 1964, he was exiled for his political activities, living in Iraq for several years before moving to France. The rapid increase in oil revenues during the 1970s, fueled by Iran's role in OPEC, brought both prosperity and discontent. Lavish ceremonies at Persepolis for the 2,500-year anniversary of the Persian Empire highlighted the monarchy's immense wealth, while the Shah invested in infrastructure, education, and the military. Benefits were unevenly distributed, and social inequality deepened. Political repression intensified, and the Savak secret police silenced dissent. The Savak was established in 1957 with CIA and Mossad help, following the 1953 coup that overthrew Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. Their role was to suppress political opposition, silence dissent, and ensure the Shah's absolute control over the nation. Religious opposition, led by Khomeini from exile, gained momentum as global media enabled his sermons to reach Iranian audiences. While urban centers and elites benefited from modernization, rural populations remained impoverished and disconnected from the Shah's vision. Rapid change and lack of political freedom fueled resentment across society, including religious leaders, intellectuals, and the working poor. By 1978, mass demonstrations against the Shah's regime engulfed the country, signaling widespread unrest. In response, the government declared martial law in Tehran and several other cities, banning demonstrations and public gatherings. On September 8, 1978, thousands defied the ban, gathering in Yale Square, now known as Martyr Square. The military opened fire on unarmed civilians, claiming hundreds, possibly thousands of lives. Though government sources reported fewer, from exile, Khomeini called for monarchy's overthrow. In 1979, the Shah fled, and Khomeini triumphantly returned, heralding the Pahlavi monarchy's collapse. A referendum abolished the monarchy, establishing the Islamic Republic of Iran with Khomeini as supreme leader under the new constitution. The new regime quickly consolidated power with indiscriminate executions of officials associated with the Shah's regime. Many army generals were executed, including the head of Safavid and Prime Minister Amir Abu Zubaydah, who expected clemency. Ayatollah Khomeini's return led to a theocratic state that suppressed opposition and controlled all branches of government. It was a new beginning for Iran, but the outcome of this profound transformation was yet to be determined. The final years of the Pahlavi dynasty were marked by rising unrest across all layers of Iranian society. Throughout the 1970s, opposition to Mohammad Reza Shah's regime grew steadily and relentlessly. Discontent wasn't limited to one group. Religious scholars, alarmed by Westernization, joined intellectuals yearning for freedom and revolutionary students. At the same time, workers from various industries staged strikes, protesting economic inequality and pervasive government corruption. This diverse coalition was united by shared grievances, authoritarian rule, and political repression by the Safavid secret police. There was a deepening disconnect between the monarchy and ordinary Iranians. Despite their different backgrounds and ideologies, these groups found a unifying figure in Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. He was living in exile, but his recorded speeches and writings circulated widely in Iran. In February 1979, after 15 years of exile in Iraq and later France, Ayatollah Khomeini returned to Iran. He was met with a hero's welcome. The Shah, facing mass protests, strikes, and defections from the military, had fled the country just weeks earlier. Khomeini's return galvanized the revolution. Within days, the Pahlavi monarchy was officially overthrown. Revolutionary committees sprang up. The royal regime collapsed. Khomeini emerged as the undisputed leader of a new political order. His message of Islamic governance, social justice, and resistance to Western imperialism resonated with millions. In the months that followed, Iran underwent a dramatic transformation. Khomeini declared the country an Islamic Republic based on his concept of Velayat-e Faqih. Faqih was developed by Khomeini based on his belief that religious authority should not be separated from political power. In his 1970 book Hukumat Islami, Velayat-e Faqih, he laid out this theory. He declared that the governance of the Faqih is the continuation of the governance of the Prophet and the Imams. Many Iranians and international observers saw it as undemocratic. The constitution and various civil and criminal laws were abolished. They were replaced by the holy law of Shiite Islam. Mehdi Bazargan, an engineer and professor at Tehran University, was appointed prime minister. He had earlier sided with Mossadegh, but was chosen for the role for being a devout Muslim. In the summer of 1979, an assembly of experts began deliberation on a proposed constitution for the Islamic Republic. The new Islamic constitution established the Wali Faqih, who was to be the supreme leader. Endowed with all the powers of the government, he was immune from opposition or contradiction. The Wali Faqih was also to supervise the Majlis and approve the qualification of individual candidates for parliament. The Islamic Republic aspired to be the major leadership of the Islamic world. It made moves in that direction, such as in Lebanon, Palestine, and Iraq. The Islamic regime decided to advance well into Iraqi territory and expand Iran's influence throughout the Middle East. However, Iraq was able to resist Iran's advances with financial support from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates, as well as with an immense arms supply from a number of Western countries. They did not want the balance of power in the Middle East to be disturbed, as it would affect their oil supply. Tensions with the United States exploded in November 1979 when radical Iranian students seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, triggering the Iran hostage crisis. Students, calling themselves Muslim followers of the Imam's line, stormed the embassy. They took 66 American diplomats hostage, accusing the U.S. of interference. The compound was overrun, and secret documents were seized. This anger stemmed from events like the 1953 CIA-led coup that reinstated the Shah. The U.S.'s strong support for Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, seen as oppressive, and his admission to the U.S. for medical treatment, fueled demands for his extradition. 52 hostages were held for 444 days. Operation Eagle Claw, a failed U.S. military rescue mission, ended in disaster, killing 8 American servicemen. The crisis symbolized American weakness, especially during the Carter administration. Hostages were released on January 20, 1981, as Ronald Reagan was sworn in. The release was negotiated through the Algiers Accords, brokered by Algeria. It included a U.S. pledge not to intervene in the unfreezing of Iranian assets. These events had devastating consequences. Iran became more isolated, contributing to President Carter's loss in the 1980 election. It also sparked new U.S. policies to counter terrorism and strengthen embassy security. With the revolution's triumph, Iran embarked on cultural purification. Western music, movies, fashion, and literature were censored or banned. Strict Islamic dress codes were enforced, particularly for women wearing the hijab. Revolutionary committees and morality police enforced new social norms. Schools were Islamized, gender segregation imposed, and public conduct monitored. The revolutionary leadership sought to forge a society aligned with their vision of Islamic values, free from what they viewed as Western moral corruption. In 1980, Iran faced an existential threat when Iraq's Saddam Hussein invaded. The Iraqi dictator wanted to establish hegemony in the Persian Gulf. He invaded, launching the devastating Iran-Iraq War. Saddam hoped to seize the Shat al-Arab waterway, but met fierce Iranian resistance. After 8 years of intense warfare, Khomeini agreed to a ceasefire following UN-sponsored negotiations in Geneva in 1988. Neither side achieved victory. Iran suffered mass casualties, hundreds of thousands of young soldiers, many inhuman wave attacks. Iraq extensively used chemical weapons. The war drained Iran economically, but leaders framed it as a sacred defense of the Islamic Revolution. Solidified martyrdom's role in Iranian culture. The memory of fallen soldiers became central to the regime's identity. Streets, schools, and public spaces were renamed in honor of martyrs. Their sacrifices were invoked to promote unity and obedience. The conflict also elevated the power of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, originally formed to protect the revolution. The IRGC became a dominant military, political, and economic force, shaping Iran's trajectory. In June 1989, Ayatollah Khomeini passed away, marking the end of the first decade of the Islamic Republic. His death raised critical questions about the future of the revolution. While the theocratic system he established endured, a new phase of pragmatism and reconstruction began under his successor Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. With the death of Khomeini and the end of the Iran-Iraq War, Iran entered a new era marked by rebuilding, reform movements, and renewed tensions with the West. These events have shaped Iran till this day. The presidency of Ali Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani from 1989 to 1997 focused on economic reconstruction after the devastating war. Rafsanjani promoted pragmatic policies, encouraging foreign investment and infrastructure development. His successor, Mohammad Khatami, ushered in a period of reformist optimism. Khatami championed civil society, freedom of expression, and dialogue with the West. His calls for a dialogue among civilizations resonated internationally. In 2001, the UN declared that year the Year of Dialogue Among Civilizations. One of the most contentious issues in contemporary Iran has been its nuclear program. As a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran is prohibited from building nuclear weapons. However, agencies like the IAEA have repeatedly raised alarms that Iran is not strictly adhering to protocols. Many countries fear Iran is secretly developing nuclear weapons. These fears have led to a series of international sanctions, diplomatic standoffs, and negotiations. In 2005, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was elected. His presidency was characterized by provocative rhetoric, including Holocaust denial and calls for the end of the Israeli state. His confrontational approach and nuclear program expansion led to increased international isolation and economic sanctions. Domestically, his policies exacerbated economic and political tensions. In 2009, Iran was rocked by the Green Movement, a massive wave of protests sparked by allegations of electoral fraud in Ahmadinejad's re-election. Millions of Iranians, particularly the youth and urban middle classes, took to the streets demanding political reform and greater freedoms. The regime responded with a brutal crackdown, arresting activists, journalists, and opposition leaders. The Green Movement revealed deep-seated discontent, but ultimately failed to bring about systemic change. Over the past 2 decades, Iran has emerged as a regional power player, projecting influence through alliances with groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shia militias in Iraq, the Assad regime in Syria, and the Houthi movement in Yemen. Iran's regional strategy has aimed to counterbalance Sunni powers like Saudi Arabia and deter Western intervention, but it has also entangled Iran in costly and controversial conflicts. In 2015, Iran and world powers signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, offering sanctions relief in exchange for limits on Iran's nuclear activities. The deal was hailed as a breakthrough in diplomacy. However, in 2018, President Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew from the agreement, reimposing sanctions. President Donald Trump and his advisors claimed that the deal was too flawed and risky for everyone involved. The JCPOA included an expiry date of 10 to 15 years, which left the world at risk after expiration. The deal also failed to address ballistic missiles, which was a major loophole that Iran took advantage of. Project AAD was a secret Iranian nuclear weapons program that operated from the late 1990s to 2000. It was said to be a program for the development of nuclear AID warheads and integrating them into ballistic missiles like the Shahab 3 missile. According to a 2007 U.S. National Intelligence estimate, Iran halted the program in 2003 in response to international pressure. In 2018, Israel's Mossad also claimed that a couple of documents confirming the existence of AMA had been retrieved from a warehouse in Thrun. All the while, Iran insists that they never pursued nuclear weapons and their nuclear energy program is entirely peaceful. The new Iran has also seen an increase in demand for women's rights. In 2022, the death of Mahsa Amini in the custody of Iran's morality police sparked nationwide protests demanding an end to mandatory hijab laws and broader reforms. On the 13th of September 2022, she was detained by Iran's morality police for allegedly wearing her hijab improperly. Witnesses say she was beaten, collapsed during a re-education session, and died 3 days later in the hospital. Her death sparked nationwide protests beginning at the hospital and spreading to her hometown and across Iran. The slogans "Women, Life, and Freedom," which in Kurdish are Jingiyan and Adi, became the unifying cry. The state responded with widespread violence, internet blackouts, mass arrests, and use of lethal force. Human rights groups estimated at least 500 to 551 people killed, including dozens of minors, and around 19,000 to 22,000 detained. The European Union awarded her the 2023 Zakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought. Honoring both Amin and the wider woman life freedom movement, her death inspired international protest songs like Beret, which won a Grammy for social change. Mahsa's death became a catalyst for the largest women uprising in Iran since 1979, challenging both oppressive laws and regime authority. Iran continues to grapple with a severe economic crisis driven by sanctions, corruption, and mismanagement. High unemployment, inflation, and currency devaluation have fueled public anger, especially among the youth. The government's response has included internet censorship, crackdowns on dissent, and arrests of activists. Despite these efforts, unrest periodically resurfaces, highlighting the fragile nature of Iran's political stability. As Iran looks to the future, it faces a profound tension between ideological rigidity upheld by the clerical establishment and demographic pressures for change. From a young, educated, and globally connected population, whether Iran will move toward greater openness and reform, or continue along its current authoritarian path, remains uncertain. What is clear is that the struggles of the past continue to shape the possibilities of tomorrow. If you found this video interesting, I recommend watching our documentary on the entire history of Israel.